Good evening. Hello and a very warm welcome. I am Meghna Mittal, Deputy News Editor, Money Control, and your host for the evening. We are delighted to have you here at Moneycontrol's Policy Next, India's $10 trillion run. I would also like to thank our associate partner, Reliance Industries, and event partners, 99 Acres and Trendline. We have conceived Policy Next as a series of conversations and debates to discuss issues and policies that shape our polity and economy. Please do remember to tweet snippets from the event with the hashtag MCPolicyNext. India is the fifth largest economy after US, China, Japan, and Germany, and we aim to become the third largest by 2027-28. We hope the various sessions today give you deep insights into what makes Indian economy so unique. With that, I would now like to invite Moneycontrol's Managing Editor, Nalin Mehta, to deliver the opening address.
Thanks very much, Meghna. Good evening, everyone. And it's my great privilege to welcome you all for the fifth edition of Moneycontrol's Policy Next. Policy Next as an idea for Moneycontrol is less than a year old. It began in March 2023 as a space for policy ideas, as an ideas exchange for drivers of change to be discussed, as Shweta Punj tells me, without noise in her view, although I think sometimes noise is good as well, and hopefully we'll get some noise today. But essentially to delve deeper into ideas and so on, go beyond the headlines to provide a platform for real policy ideas. We've had 4 editions before this. The first one was on infrastructure. The second one was around the Karnataka elections and debates around the state economics in Bangalore. The third one was on MSMEs. The fourth one was on the G20. And today, just a few days before the interim budget, of course, we focused on India's $10 trillion run. We have a stellar panel and a stellar lineup for the rest of the evening, starting with Modinomics 3.0 with Jayant Sinha, the chairperson for the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance. We have a very stellar panel after that on the larger macro story. Then on inflation, which of course is a real important issue, especially ahead of the elections and the government's view on that and various measures around that, with Rohit Kumar Singh, the Secretary for Consumer Affairs. There's a fireside chat with him. And then of course a very interesting panel on women. Women-led development around issues around gender are fundamentally important to this government's policies. So this panel kind of dissects all of that ahead of the budget. A panel on a status check on GST reforms, and finally the keynote with the Power Minister, Mr. R.K. Singh. So we have an evening full of ideas, debate, and questions ahead of us. So once again, welcome everyone, and Meghna, back to you.
Thank you so much for giving a sneak peek into what the evening looks like going ahead. I would now like to invite someone who has been a very active parliamentarian. He has opened the debate on India's annual budget on multiple occasions. He has led some of the most crucial ministries of finance and civil aviation. He gained recognition as a results-oriented policymaker, and he piloted the legislation that brought in India's game-changing bankruptcy code to establishing India's sovereign wealth fund to privatize multiple airports. He launched the Udan Regional Connectivity Scheme, which expanded the number of operational airports in India by 50%. The member of the Parliament and the chairperson of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance, please welcome Mr. Jayant Sinha, who is joining us virtually from his constituency, Hazaribagh. Please give a big round of applause for Mr. Jayant Sinha.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I'm very pleased to be with you this evening, all the way from Hazaribagh in Jharkhand. I will apologize right up front for not being there in person. As you well understand, with elections around the corner and with the party keeping us busy with many different programs and the time to spend that we have to in our constituencies, it was not possible for me to be in Delhi. And because I'm in Hazaribagh in Jharkhand, obviously we always have issues of infrastructure So if there are any problems with respect to bandwidth or electricity, please do bear with me. We have alternatives, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time to switch from one internet connection to another internet connection. So I'll apologize for that right up front. But I think you all are setting exactly the right target, which is to ask how India can move well beyond 5 trillion, which of course we know is going to happen and is virtually just a matter of the next 2 or 3 years. And really start to focus a little bit more longer term, which is a 5 to 10 year view of how do we get to $10 trillion. And to that end, what happens in the Honorable Prime Minister's third term, which is Modinomics 3.0, is really going to set the stage for the $10 trillion aspiration. Now, it has been my great fortune and privilege to have been associated with Modinomics 1.0 and 2.0 in my role first as the Minister of State in Finance and Civil Aviation, and then as chair of the Standing Committee on Finance in my second term. And of course, we are all eagerly looking forward to Modinomics 3.0 and the policies that will take us to 10 trillion and beyond. So as I try and highlight this journey, as I try and talk about the transformation that the country has gone through over the last decade or so, I'm hoping thereby to set the stage for what Modinomics 3.0 will look like. So it's important to understand Modinomics 1.0 and then Modinomics 2.0 to really understand how 3.0 can build on it and take it forward. And as I look at these three phases, Modinomics 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, let me start off first by characterizing these three terms with three different words, and then just click on each of those words and try and explain why I have used those words to describe these three different terms. So I would say that the first term, Modi 1.0, was really about strengthening the economy and preparing the economy. So really the word to keep in mind here is strengthening. The second phase, which we are now ending, Modi 2.0, is really the phase that is characterized by Atmanirbharta, and I really think of it as resilience, building a resilient economy. So first step was to really strengthen the economy, and then the second step has been to build a much more resilient economy. And I think what's really exciting about Modinomics 3.0 and the run to $10 trillion, that this next phase coming up, and you're already seeing the foreshadowing of it, is going to be about leadership, particularly global leadership. So again, the three phases are Modinomics 1.0, strengthening, Modinomics 2.0, resilience, and Modinomics 3.0, leadership. These are the three important phases for each of the three terms. Now let me double click on those and explain what I mean by that. To understand Modinomics 1.0 and 2.0, all you need to know is 30 letters. 30 letters, if you know 30 letters, you'll understand really the last 10 years of our economic policy making. So let me explain what I mean by that. Phase one, of course, Modinomics 1.0, we can understand through 15 letters. And those 15 letters are GST, IBC, DBT, SBA for Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, and AYB for Ayushman Bharat. 15 letters that describe really the pillars of policy making in Modinomics 1.0. And this was a time when we really truly had to strengthen the economy. If you remember, in 2014, when our government was formed, we were still viewed as a fragile 5 country. Growth had dropped below 5%. It was about 4% something. Inflation was running at 10%. The currency was wobbly. We were considered a fragile 5 country. And so we had to strengthen the economy. We had to put in place long pending reforms that were going to make our economy much, much stronger. And we did that. Obviously, GST has been an incredible game changer. You've seen what it has done to our competitiveness, the way it has streamlined our economy. We got rid of 37 different indirect taxes, and we've introduced the world's most expansive, most efficient indirect tax system through the GST. Similarly, through the IBC, we changed India's creditor culture completely. Instead of bankers having to run after promoters, now promoters are very, very watchful that they don't go into default, they don't create any NPA type situations, because now the power is with the bankers, with the creditors when a default happens. Similarly, DBT, direct benefit transfer, through which we provide benefits, cash transfers, Narega payments, a variety of other kinds of payments directly into people's bank accounts by making sure that we have got a bank account for every single individual, every single family in India. DBT has been an absolute game changer when it comes to social security, when it comes to welfare. Similarly, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan has obviously contributed to reducing open defecation, for being able to reduce the health burden, the disease burden, and really providing a whole different way of thinking about the necessary public facilities, the necessary private facilities to ensure dignity to all of our people. So I think Swachh Bharat Abhiyan absolutely is there. It also showed us that we can get to every single house across India and provide them the facilities that we need. And then finally, Ayushman Bharat, a universal social security health insurance scheme, 5 lakhs per family. So that's how we strengthen the economy, through streamlining, through social security, through behavioral change, through all of these different ways, the economy was strengthened, and that was Modinomics 1.0. Now, let me come to Modinomics 2.0. Another 15 letters will describe it. PLI, for production linked incentives, which have been incredible success, obviously, by bringing manufacturing back to India. AIL, the privatization of Air India and the continued growth of aviation, of course, Air India itself placing an order for 470 planes, Indigo placing an order for 500 planes, but also showing that the government understands what the natural limits to its activities are. Air India clearly is something that belongs in the private sector. The privatization of Air India is a true game changer in that respect. And obviously, I was able to play a role in that and saw exactly how it was done. Then I will talk about another 3 letters, alternative investment funds, AIFs. And the reason I'm bringing up AIFs because the AIFs are a key driver of our startup economy, and the innovation, the 112 unicorns that we have right now, much of that has happened because we have unlocked alternative assets through AIFs. We've built the domestic venture capital and private equity industry, and there are now more than 6 lakh crores worth of assets in AIFs. That's a very powerful driver for the Indian economy. 2 more, and I'll go over them quickly. UPI, I don't need to describe that. You know what's happened, digital payments, and GKY for Garib Kalyan Yojana, where we've ensured that 80 crore people are getting free food grains. So these are the 15 letters. These are the 5 major pillars of Modinomics 2.0, production-linked incentives, Air India privatization, alternative investment funds, UPI, and Garib Kalyan Yojana. Modinomics 1.0, Modinomics 2.0, 30 letters is all you need to know them. Now, as we look forward, we've now set the stage where we have effectively a $4 trillion economy that's growing at 7% plus and is easily going to get to $5 trillion. The Honorable Prime Minister has already said, ये मेरी गारंटी है, मैं आपको आश्वासन देता हूं कि अगले कार्यकाल में हम लोगों की $5 ट्रिलियन की इकोनॉमी होगी और हम लोग विश्व में अर्थ शक्ति बनेंगे, third largest हम लोगों की इकोनॉमी होगी. So that, I think that $5 trillion goal is well in hand. What are we going to do to get to $10 trillion over the next 5 or 10 years? Those are the important drivers. Those are the important policies that we need to think about. And if I were to look forward and speculate on what could be the 4 or 5 important pillars of Modinomics 3.0, here's what I would say. Number 1, continued digitization. Of course, we've done UPI, but there's ONDC coming. There is, of course, new ways in which we can digitize other sectors like electric charging. You've already seen what Digi Yatra can do, for example, in aviation. So continued digitization of the economy is going to be a very major driver. Number 2, decarbonization. The greening of our economy, getting onto the net zero trajectory, decarbonization is also going to be a very major driver over the next 5 or 10 years. Number three, and you'll see the pattern here. I'm sorry, I just lost electricity, so please excuse me. But number three is inclusion. We are going to continue to strengthen our social security platform. We are going to make sure that we are able to provide all of the requirements of modern day living to our people. So inclusion is going to continue to be very important for us. Urbanization, which is the fourth driver, we are moving towards cities. Cities are growing, enabling us to get more productive. So urbanization will continue to be a very important driver. And the final and fifth driver that I see as part of Modinomics 3.0 is innovation. We have reached a critical mass as far as our startup economy is concerned. We have the world's third largest startup ecosystem. We have a thriving venture capital private equity industry. And these big innovation engines are going to continue to drive our economy and enable decarbonization to happen, enable urbanization to happen. So these are the five drivers. The pattern here is that they all, of course, end with ION: digitization, decarbonization, inclusion, urbanization, and innovation. These are, I think, going to be the major drivers of Modinomics 3.0. Let me conclude my opening remarks, and of course, happy to thereafter take questions, by saying the following. 20 years ago, our economy was a $0.7 trillion economy. Now, we are roughly a $4 trillion economy. In the last 20 years, our economy has grown by $3.3 trillion. Market capitalization of listed securities has also grown by about $3 trillion. In fact, market cap to GDP tends to be 1:1, slightly more than 1:1, in fact. Over the next 20 years, friends, our economy is going to grow beyond $10 trillion. By 2047, that is in the mid-2040s, 100 years after independence, we are likely to have an economy that's somewhere between $15 to $20 trillion if we continue to grow at 6%. Let me repeat that. Our economy is going to grow from $4 trillion to somewhere between $15 to $20 trillion, and this is in absolute dollars, not in purchasing power parity terms, so that our economy is probably by 2047 going to be a $15 to $20 trillion economy. Now, if GDP to market cap remains at the same ratio that it is right now, which is 1:1, then the market cap of our listed securities, and I'm sure Moneycontrol viewers will be very interested in this, because this is a channel, after all, about money and about wealth creation. We are going to go from 4 trillion to, let's say, 16 trillion. And that means that the wealth creation we are going to see over the next 20 years is going to be $12 trillion. $12 trillion. So if over the last 20 years, we have created $3 trillion of wealth in our markets, in the next 20 years, we are going to see $12 trillion. That is four times that wealth creation in our markets as well, in terms of listed securities. So if you think the last 20 years have been terrific and fantastic for India, and India, of course, has had, after the US, the second best performing markets in dollar terms, not just in rupee terms, but in dollar terms. So what we have seen over the last 20 years is 1/4 of what we're going to see over the next 20 years. The wealth creation, the growth of the economy, the infrastructure built out, the real estate assets, all of this is going to be 4 times what we have seen over the last 20 years. So, friends, as we get ready for Modinomics 3.0 and 4.0 and 5.0, I can assure you that what we are going to see in terms of economic growth, wealth creation, and all kinds of positive benefits for everyone in India is going to be
Thank you, sir, for that address on Modinomics 3.0. If we are still connected, then we can take some questions with him. Are we still
Yeah,
connected with the minister?
yes, I'm very much here, yes.
Okay, okay. I would like to invite Money Control's Deputy Editor, Shweta Punj, for a fireside chat with Mr. Sinha.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha. I'd request you to please conclude your address. I think we lost you in between. Can we have...
No, I'm still here. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes, yes, yes. Super. Let's have you conclude the address. We lost you midway, so I'll request you to just continue.
Yes, were you there when I said that we in the last 20 years have gone from 0.7 trillion to 4 trillion as far as GDP is concerned? You heard that?
Yes, we heard all of that. Yes, yes.
And then, of course, as I said, $12 trillion of incremental wealth creation going forward.
Yes.
And therefore, what I was saying was that even though the last 20 years have been terrific for India, the next 20 years are going to be 4 times better in terms of the absolute size of the wealth creation and the opportunities that are going to unfold going forward. So as they say, achhe din, and the best is yet to come.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Sinha. That's a very, very optimistic note for us to kickstart the Policy Next conclave, which is focusing clearly and very specifically on the economic policies shaping India. And I think very few people can really articulate Modinomics 1.0, 2.0, and present a vision for 3.0 the way you have done for us today. Thank you so much. Can we have a huge round of applause, please, for Mr. Jayant Sinha? I always tell him that if he wasn't a politician, he would have been a professor. And I think he's so good at it. We were all taking notes here, Mr. Sinha. It was wonderful. Thank you so much for your time and for capturing the key highlights for us in the last decade. One question that I'd like to ask you is that we are also living in very uncertain times. We face geopolitical risks. We face climate risks. How vulnerable is India when it comes to gearing up to deal with these new world challenges today?
No, that's a great question, Shweta. And I think as far as the Indian economy is concerned, as far as our companies are concerned, our entrepreneurs are concerned, we are very well positioned. We are resilient. We have fantastic demographics, and we can continue to grow with that momentum at 6 or 7% for a very long time. However, what we have seen is that it is not so much the Indian economy. It really is external factors that start to create challenges for India. Obviously, we've had to deal with COVID that created real issues for us in the last few years. Now we are dealing with the geopolitical challenges of what is happening in the Ukraine and the Middle East as well. So geopolitical factors are always going to be very risky as they are for everyone else in the world. But because we have an open economy, we have a very oriented economy, for us they are also very, very important, particularly in terms of foreign exchange. What we've seen is that whenever we've had a geopolitical crisis like a war in the Middle East, and oil prices or energy prices or other commodity prices have gone up, because we are a big commodity importer, those price moves, those price spikes have been quite volatile and have created challenges for us. So geopolitical risks play out for India through both exports getting softer and commodity prices going up. And therefore, we have to be very watchful. Now, as I mentioned, I think decarbonization is a very important driver for us. And you spoke about geopolitical risk and you spoke about climate risk. If we really push digitization and decarbonization, what we have done in Modinomics 2.0, which is to build a resilient economy, will become even more resilient and even more able to weather geopolitical risks. Because if we are secure in terms of our energy supplies, and if it's coming from solar and wind and green hydrogen, which we are producing in our own country, we don't have to import fossil fuels. That will make us a lot more resilient. And of course, climate is a major challenge for us. Sadly, the amount of carbon that's in the atmosphere pretty much means that we're going to see very significant climate impacts for India as well. But again, if we move towards decarbonization, if we move towards having energy systems which are moving away from fossil fuels, we will improve our resilience with respect to climate as well. So digitization, which improves our productivity, makes us more competitive, innovation that adds to our competitiveness, that of course will make us able to handle geopolitical risk. And then number two, decarbonization also makes us able to deal with commodity price shocks. Now, I will say one final thing, which is that some of these geopolitical risks are actually favorable to us. So a lot of the trade wars that have broken out, a lot of the challenges that are happening because of China and their policies, those are geopolitical risks, but they're actually positive for India because of China plus one. As the world looks to build more resilient supply chains, India becomes the natural production platform for people. So some of these geopolitical risks have both downside surprises, but also upside surprises for us. So as long as we are resilient, as long as we are flexible and we have dynamic policy making, we can actually take advantage of some of these geopolitical risks as well as climate change. So as long as we pursue competitiveness, as long as we have an open economy, because of our entrepreneurs, our positive demographics, we are extremely well positioned.
Thanks for that, Mr. Sinha. I have to also ask you, we are in an election year, and this is going to be a very crucial year across the world, and more so for India. Now, post-COVID, we saw a whole host of policies that were geared towards the bottom of the pyramid. We saw this whole debate taking center stage between freebies and what's considered freebies and what's considered necessary and so on. We are barely 2 weeks away from the budget. It's an election year. It's a year of global uncertainty. It's a year where the world is in great turmoil. If you were finance minister, what are the big considerations that would be weighing your mind as you were putting together the budget?
Well, Shweta, I'm not the finance minister, and therefore I would hesitate to speculate on these matters, particularly with the budget around the corner. But what I said earlier, I think reflects the thinking across government, which is that we have to have a strong economy. We have to have a resilient economy. We have to have an economy that's innovative, that's digitizing, decarbonizing. And these are the pillars that we have to build on. These are the pillars that we have to strengthen. So it's a risky, uncertain world. In this uncertain world, a resilient, robust economy is our best protection. And I think the government is committed to that.
So I'd request you to put on your, economist hat, you were the MOS for finance earlier. At a time like this, when the expectation is of fiscal prudence, and yet we do know that there is a lot of uncertainty, would you have a suggestion, would you have a wish list for the finance minister?
No, I think we have to maintain stability and continuity with our policies. I think we have very excellent policies. What we have seen with, let's say, the PLI scheme has been very, very beneficial to India. We have to stay the course on it. We have streamlined our taxes. We have really made ease of doing business a very important mantra for all our government. We have to maintain the course on all of this because they really position us well as far as competitiveness is concerned. One thing that I would like us to do more of is obviously decarbonization and moving towards net zero even faster. Because we've seen what China has done is that they have really established a pole position on some of the important green industries of the future, like, of course, solar panels, like, of course, battery storage, like, of course, electric vehicles. These are the industries of the future. This is what will drive competitiveness. And the good news, as I keep saying, is that net zero is net positive. Net zero is net positive. And so we find that solar power is cheaper than fossil fuel power. We find that electric vehicles are more cost effective compared to fossil ICE internal combustion engine vehicles. So what we are seeing is that decarbonization is the next wave of cost effective technologies. So I really think it's very important for us to accelerate our investments, to be even more innovative, and to really drive this net zero transition as quickly as we can. And of course, I represent a coal-bearing district. I recognize that coal has a finite life. And so the faster and quicker we move to these innovative green technologies, the better off we are going to be. So I think, as I keep saying, India should pursue a green frontier development model. A green frontier development model where we combine competitiveness on the one hand and sustainability on the other. And the two go hand in hand. For us to be competitive, we have to be sustainable. And I think competitiveness and sustainability, an open, very stable, resilient economy is really what is required going forward. And that's the kind of economy we are building through 1.0 and 2.0. And I think that's the economy we will continue to build in 3.0.
Thanks for that, Mr. Sinha. Acer survey came out with some very startling findings, and I'm not sure if you've had a chance to look at them, but it essentially is showing us that our children are not getting educated to the levels that we would like for them to be, right? And India's demographic dividend currently is a positive, but it could turn into a disaster if we do not fix our skilling challenge, if we do not fix the quality of our education. I wanted to get your thoughts in on that, because I know that you're very passionate about this and you've constantly been reiterating this point.
You're absolutely right, Shweta. And first, let me touch on India's extraordinary demographics. This is not something that people spend a lot of time thinking about, but it really, over the long run, is India's most positive feature, which is that our economy has a demographic sort of picture that is both very young in terms of our workforce and is also going to continue to grow for the next 30, 40 years. Please remember the following facts. These, I think, are the most important facts for all economy watchers, for all investors. By 2100, India's population is going to be 1.6 billion. So our population is going to grow from where we are at about 1.41, 1.42 billion to 1.6 billion. It's going to continue to grow over the next 70, 80 years. China's population, on the other hand, is going to go from 1.41 billion. Friends, it's going to go from 1.41 billion to 800 million. China's population is actually declining already by 2 million people a year. So they're going to go down to 800 million from 1.4 billion by 2100. And the US is going to also continue to grow slowly. They're going to go from about 350 million to 400 million. To really understand long-term trends, these are the three key numbers you have to remember. 1.6 billion for India, 800 million for China, 400 million for America. This positive demographics for India is extraordinarily important. However, to take full advantage of this incredible demographic windfall that we're getting relative to the rest of the world, we absolutely have to invest massively in skilling and in our education system and in our training. That is absolutely essential for us, and that is really what we also need to concentrate on. I can tell you that in my own constituency of Hazaribagh, we are focusing on this tremendously. We are lucky that we have the district mineral fund from which we get royalties from coal. As part of that, I have taken 2,800 Anganwadi Kendras, and we have fully upgraded all of them. I have then also made sure that our schools are getting all the necessary facilities that we need. Our health centers are better equipped. And most importantly, we're building our two massive Akshay Patra kitchens in Hazaribagh and Ramgarh so that our children can benefit. And that's what we need to do. We need to get all of these facilities for our young people and use artificial intelligence and technology to be able to leapfrog as far as education is concerned. That's extremely important.
Okay, my colleague Gaurav has a question for you. I'm just going to hand over the mic to him.
Thanks, Mr. Sinha. Thanks for laying out the vision for 2047. And also, I mean, there's no gainsaying the fact that the next 2 decades belong to India. India's growth potential needs no emphasis. But having said that, I would like to, pick your brains on something that this government has attempted over the last 10 years, but has not really met with great success, which is essentially factor market reforms, particularly land. Now, for India to achieve its growth potential, what kind of a challenge do you foresee? Because this falls right in the matrix of political economy, where states will have to get involved, and you need to have complete bipartisan support to bring land reforms, which is an essential for India to achieve its full growth potential.
No, I agree with that. That we need to do more as far as land reform is concerned. And that process is underway. There is, in fact, an attempt to digitize land records across India that is being worked on. We are trying to come up with a Kisan portal that will enable people to register their land holdings and be able to take advantage of that, to be able to take loans, etc. And so we are working on all of those different methods to be able to streamline land holdings, etc. Obviously, with the introduction of the Real Estate Reforms Act, RERA, and so on, that also has helped us when it comes to urban properties to register them and make sure that they are dealt with appropriately. So land reforms are crucially important. Certainly, again, as I've seen in Jharkhand, they are a great impediment if they're not dealt with. But some of our more modern and progressive states are handling it very well right now.
Mr. Sinha, I'm going to switch gears a little bit from economics. I'm going to move on to politics a little bit. We briefly touched upon AI. I was hoping to get a perspective from you on how crucial do you think would AI be in these general elections? And considering BJP has always taken the lead in embracing technology, what can we expect in the run-up to general elections 2024?
Well, I'm sure you'll find that the BJP is on the cutting edge of all technologies, artificial intelligence and other technologies. And we are obviously always trying our level best to make sure that we are able to bring the full set of services and information to our voters. So we will, of course, always be on the cutting edge. We have been on the cutting edge. At the same time, we all worry about deep fakes and fake news and all of those things. We are already seeing in many elections around the world, like in the Bangladesh election and the Philippine election, that these are being misused and abused. Now, we have, of course, got the new set of IT rules and regulations around that. But we will have to be watchful because artificial intelligence is getting better and better and better. It's extraordinary how powerful it already is. So we will have to be watchful, and we will have to make sure that not only are the policies properly implemented, but our people are knowledgeable about understanding what is genuine and what is not genuine. So it is a real threat to democracies everywhere. We recognize that there are a lot of positive aspects to it, but it will require very thoughtful regulation. And of course, we need to make sure that our voters are fully literate about these issues.
So are you using AI in your constituency?
Well, all I can say is
targeting of voters and messaging?
Wait and watch.
All right. I want to talk to you about the production-linked incentive scheme as well, one of the highlights of Modinomics 2.0. But when you look at the numbers, when you look at the outgo under those schemes, while we've had pockets of excellence in that scheme, but it hasn't panned out as planned in certain sectors, and when you speak to industry players, they do highlight bureaucracy and red tape as one of the concerns. Is the government mindful of this, and are you doing something to address this?
Yes, of course, we're doing everything to address any concerns that business people have with respect to the PLI scheme or any other scheme. In fact, I think what you'll find is one of the hallmarks of our government is that we have a very dynamic government that listens well to business and is continuously changing and improving policies, laws, regulations so that they ensure ease of doing business and ensure the continued economic growth and vitality of India. And we've consistently done that. I can point to many examples. And if there are areas in the PLI scheme that need to be tweaked, I'm sure the Commerce Ministry and the other line ministries will be listening and receiving feedback from stakeholders and continuously improving all these policies.
Mm-hmm. I'd also like to talk to you about one of the major tax reforms that you've been a part of, GST. It's overhauled our indirect taxation system, but currently we do know that the finance ministry has been on an overdrive in terms of sending notices. The industry is literally been pushed into a corner, Mr. Sinha. I want to get your sense on this, because while it's been a reform, but at the moment it's giving a lot of heartburn.
I have not heard that, Shweta, and of course, as chair of the Standing Committee on Finance, I am continuously in touch with business people all the time. Many people come to me with their views, their petitions, but I have not heard much in terms of GST recently. Of course, as you know, that compliance is something that we are focusing on right now, because we want to make sure that the GST that is due to us comes to us, and so we are very focused on compliance. We found a lot of GST fraud, as you know, and that in fact is one of the reasons why GST collections are continuously improving, because we are closing loopholes or closing scams that people were using through fake invoicing and overbilling and under invoicing and all of those different things. So compliance is important. Compliance is being strengthened. And if anybody has any genuine issues, genuine grievances, of course, I'm sure the Finance Ministry and the Standing Committee on Finance would be very happy to listen to any concerns that they might have.
So we have a lot of business people in the audiences, and they are holding on to every word you're saying. so expect some people to get in touch with you on this. Thank you very much, Mr. Sinha, for joining us from Hazaribagh. Before we leave you, we just want one projection from you for this year, 2024. What's the growth target that you are working with and that you think that India will achieve?
I think we'll cross 7%.
Wow. Okay, great. Thank you so much on ending on a very, very optimistic note. We wish you the very best. And of course, we look forward to seeing you back in Delhi soon. Thank you very much, Mr. Sinha.
Thank you very much, Shweta. Thank you for hosting me. Great to interact with all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha and Shweta, for that very insightful discussions. And rightly said, geopolitical risks definitely have both upside and downside surprises for India. Moving on straight to our first panel discussion. For India to take the flight to becoming a $10 trillion economy, are we prepared enough? Are India's macroeconomic fundamentals strong enough? Through our first set of expert panelists, let us look into what is unique about India's macro story. I would like to invite Gaurav Chaudhary, Consulting Editor, Moneycontrol, to moderate this session, please. Joining him for the panel, I would like to invite Aditi Nair, Chief Economics, ICRA. Please come on the stage. Devinder Pant, Chief Economist, India Ratings and Research. Ashwini Mahajan, Chief Economist, Swadeshi Jagran Manch. And Subhash Chandra Garg, former Finance Secretary to Government of India.
Thank you so much. We are meeting at a time barely 2 weeks before the interim budget is going to be presented, and there cannot be a better occasion to talk about the macro story, because the budget is all about macroeconomics. And while the finance minister has said that it's going to be only a vote on account, she probably is trying to temper expectations by saying there is nothing going to be spectacular here. But if 2019 is any indication, probably we should look for some surprises on the positive side, both for individual income taxes and also on the policy side. So let's start off by some very basic macro questions. And first to Aditi. Aditi, this government has, over the last 10 years, has demonstrated its intent to walk the talk on fiscal discipline. And that is something that has remained consistent and a given over the last 10 years. Do you expect, given the fact that this is a pre-election budget, do you think that the government could actually suffer from some kind of pressure of populism and it's going to waver from that path? Or do you think they're going to continue being on the same glide path?
Thank you so much, and thank you so much to Moneycontrol for inviting me to be part of this panel. Yeah. So, this is actually, as you said, a very interesting pre-election year. We've had a very high headline-grabbing budget last year. The biggest headline of the budget was the 10 trillion Capex allocation. And as we've gone through the year, we've actually seen that there has been quite a lot of optimism on the tax side. Our forecasts are that the gross tax revenues are going to exceed the budget estimate. So will the non-tax revenues on some accounts. But disinvestment has been a bit tardy so far. So the total upside on the revenue and the capital receipts we think is going to be modest. On the expenditure side, we see a little bit of overshooting on the revenue expenditure. And unfortunately, we see a little bit of undershooting on the capital expenditure. Net, the absolute fiscal deficit target doesn't seem to be under much threat. Perhaps we need another supplementary in this quarter for food and for Manrega. But we don't think that there is going to be a slippage in the absolute number. As far as the nominal GDP, because that's coming in a little lower than what the budget had projected. So perhaps the fiscal deficit could end up at 6% of GDP instead of 5.9%, but that's really a very marginal, that's a quibble. Yeah. That's really not a concern.
Dr. Ashwini Mahajan, in the last interim budget, we saw the government actually announce the PM Kisan scheme of 6,000 rupees for farmers. 5 years hence, do you think it's about time for an appraisal? Can we expect that to go up a bit or significantly in this budget?
See, it's very natural that with inflation, needs are changed. So there can be, and they may not be. Because government doesn't want to be looked upon as some government which is a populist government. And it has never been a populist government. Look at what states are doing and look at what the central government is doing. We have a lot of difference between the two. Like if the government has been spending on social sector, it is spending on making pakka houses for the poor, for Ujjwala scheme, for water being made available to all, or so all these schemes are can't be called populist schemes. And I don't see, as a student of economics, I've never seen this government going populist. So far as the numbers are concerned, I feel this year fiscal deficit is going to be less than the projected one. The very fact that in the first 8 months, we had used only 50% of the projected fiscal deficit, and in 4 months, the figures are not going to change anymore. So I humbly disagree with our co-panelist that fiscal deficit numbers we may slip, we may not.
So we are going to stick to and you think that the government is going to stick to the medium-term fiscal policy target of 4.5%. Devendra Pant, on that note, do you think the 4.5% fiscal deficit target by 2026, which is the medium-term target, is something that is achievable and the government is going to stick to it, regardless of pressures of populism?
Look, if you look at past 2.5 decade period, there has been instances when government was able to correct fiscal deficit by 140, 150 basis point over a 2-year period. Out of these 8 instances, 4 instances were when in the base year fiscal deficit ballooned like we had during the time of COVID. But in 4 instances, government was able to correct. Now, if you look at those periods, generally those periods coincides with high nominal and real GDP growth, right? Now, if you look at current landscape, in terms of when we look at across the globe, we are shining star. But if you're looking at 7.5%, if we continue this kind of growth, the next year, what is going to happen? Mr. Mahajan may not agree. So I'm, with that caveat, I'm saying, the next fiscal year likely to see a lower real growth. Okay. But we had seen in this fiscal year, first 6 months, our WPI was negative. Yes. That is going to give you a bump up to your deflator growth, and you may end up having a higher nominal GDP growth. And because of that, it will be a tough journey. So we believe they will do something around 5.3 the next fiscal year, and the heavy lifting of 5.3 to 4.5, 80 basis point, that has to be done in FY26, provided we continue to grow.
That's right. Subhash Chandra Garg, Devendra Pant made a very important point that for the first 6 months, WPI was negative, and that could probably bump up the deflator. But I have a different question related to that. Negative WPI for a sustained period of time could also reflect very low pricing power for farmers and producers. How much of a worrying sign is that?
See, from the pricing point of view, the two trends are very clearly visible. While the retail inflation is still higher, something close to about 6%, and in that the food prices are relatively higher. But the wholesale price, as I said, last 1 year or so, these are continuously declining. For about 9 months, they were in the negative, right? So the pricing and the deflator, as Mr. Pant was also saying, which is the wholesale, the GDP kind of inflation, is very low, which is reflected in the nominal growth being something close to about 9%, whereas the real is only about 7.3%. So deflator inflation is very low. So this changes the dynamics for the individual groups so farmers, you asked me, so farmers receive the prices from the inflation, food inflation if they receive. But since we took a lot of measures to curb exports and which did not drive probably as much price increase in wheat, rice, onions, etc. So farmers probably are better off, but not as good if the free market was allowed to operate, in my judgment. But the labor, which is the bigger group, their incomes don't seem to have gone up. More profits have occurred to the businesses, the companies, etc., which is also reflected in higher income taxes, the higher corporate taxes as well. So the businesses are having good time. The labor, to my mind, is not having that good time, and farmers just so-so.
That's right. Aditi, the two big numbers, the two big recent numbers in the macro space has been the growth projections for this year, FY24, and also what recently, I think as recent as yesterday, what the RBI governor said that next year, that is FY25 growth could be around 7% or so. Are you as bullish?
So, I don't like to use the word bullish. I am generally very optimistic on the Indian economy, but my growth forecast for this year and next year are slightly more tempered. For FY24, we're looking at a real GDP growth of 6.5%. And for next year, a lot will depend on the monsoon. In particular, this year, some of the growth outcomes are getting depressed, especially for the second half of the year, because we had a particularly uneven monsoon, and the fallout of that is being seen in a lot of the agri-related indicators. So, unfortunately, economists like myself and Devendra Pant, every April we get onto monsoon watch, and that's going to be really important next year as well. But we are right now looking at a GDP growth in the range of around 6.2% in FY25. If we have a well-distributed monsoon, this can certainly go up. If geopolitical tensions ease and commodity prices stay range-bound, then also it could go up. So as the minister was talking earlier, the interplay of what happens with geopolitical tensions on both demand and commodity prices is quite impactful on the margin as far as Indian growth is concerned. If we have low demand with low commodity prices, then net-net we still end up being a gainer because we are a huge commodity importer. But in an unfortunate situation like, let's say, the fallout of the Russia-Ukraine war, where not only demand and sentiment was depressed, but commodity prices surged for several months. So in a situation like that, we do end up seeing a negative impact on our growth. And otherwise, I would say that our demographics, down the road, of course, are very positive. But even right now, I see that there is a lot of high sentiment in many groups. I do still believe that demand is quite uneven. But there is a high propensity to spend in many urban groups, and that is something that can really drive demand going forward. Is that necessarily consistent with a stable and low inflation? I think that is a question that we still need to answer.
So that's a known unknown. Dr. Ashwini Mahajan, we just heard a former MOS Finance, Jansen, and also the chairman of the Standing Committee on Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance lay down the vision for 2047 and how India's nominal GDP is going to touch about anywhere between 15 to 20 trillion. That's 4 times of the current level. What are the reforms that you think that need immediate attention for us to actually achieve that growth potential?
I feel the government is on the right track so far as the economic policy is concerned. The very fact that between 2004 and 14, there was a kind of deindustrialization caused by increase in the imports from China by 3,000%. And this government had very rightly started with Make in India, but that Make in India didn't really work for about 3-4 years till we didn't rise to the occasion that it is not just saying so, we need to do something about it by way of tariff hikes, and that was done in Arun Jaitley's 2018's budget. When we raised tariffs on electronics and then later on textiles and then on white goods. And that has actually led to an increase in the production in India and exports too. We were net importers of mobile phones. We started exporting and reached up to $7 billion. And so the very fact that we need to make some tweaks in the policies, you can't be fundamentalist in for globalization. And what we had been doing during all these years, when Vajpayee ji left the government, at that time the average weighted tariff was 24%, and which was drastically reduced to just 6 to 7% in just 1 year. That was the trigger towards the deindustrialization. And now when the government is coming out with the PLI schemes, tweaking the tariffs, imposing quotas where required, and you just see, just one example I will tell you. One simple step of the government of putting out quota for imports on laptops made 38 companies apply for the license for the PLI, and that is going to change the whole scenario in laptop production in India. And similar policies for 15 sectors, subsectors, as you know. I don't want to list out all these sectors. So the government is on the right track. We will start producing APIs very soon. Within 2-3 years, I believe that production of semiconductors is going to happen. Already we are into solar. Already we are doing so good in space. And you see, all this industry 4.0, all these segments we are doing good. So I don't see any reason for any failure in achieving that $20 trillion or so.
That's right. Devendra Pant, you know, a large part of it, I mean, there is no gainsaying the fact that consumption spending or household spending remains the strongest edifice of the India growth story. And if we are to achieve a $20 trillion nominal GDP target or a goal by 2047 over the next 20 years, so we have to sustain household consumption, and it has to grow at a very strong pace over a long period of time. What do you think that needs to be done in this budget, the interim budget, and also finally the full budget when it comes along in July to sustain this? What are the kinds of specific policy interventions that is required to spur consumption growth?
Look, when we look at consumption, it responds very strongly to real wage growth. And if you look at it, in the recent time, if you look at the corporate sector, look at the other organized sector, you see good wage growth. The moment you look at, it's again the government fixed rates or the agriculture wages, their wage growth is not keeping the same pace with the inflation. So they are either in negative territory or now they have moved slightly in the positive territory. Now what happens is, if your real wages goes up by 1 percentage point, the kind of response it gives to the economy, your consumption growth goes up by 112 basis points, and your overall GDP growth goes up by 64 basis points. The biggest risk, which was, is, and always remain, is the inflation. If you bring down inflation to 4% is the target, around that level. Even without increasing the nominal wages, which reflect on the balance sheet of the corporates, you can achieve a higher growth. So what kind of policies or reform government can come out which will keep a lid on inflation growth? That will be the game changer, so to say.
Absolutely. Subhash Garg, we talked about fiscal deficit in the beginning, but again, let's come back to the point in a different, discuss a different aspect, which is capital expenditure. In the last budget, we saw that the government, penciled in a capital expenditure of more than 13 lakh crore, and to sustain that kind of capital expenditure over a long period of time, clearly is going to put enough pressure on fiscal deficit. So government borrowings could go up. How does the government balance this?
See, the Capex story is one of the biggest USP of the government. For last 3 years, the Capex has been increased every year by on an average 25 to 30%. And that's reflected into enormous amount of investment which is going into railways, roads, metros, etc. The high visible trophy points, and that works very well politically. It was not 13 trillion, it was 10 trillion last year. There is some substitution, we should always remember. Most of the capital expenditure earlier was used by the amounts which railways and HAIs used to borrow on their own account. That has been stopped. Now railways doesn't borrow, NHI doesn't borrow. Something to the effect of 3 to 4 lakh crore is actually substitution. So in that sense, the Capex is not that large. It is good, it's growing, but we need to adjust that. So very clearly, since this is working very well, it is having large visible effect on the people, the electorate, voters. So I would expect this to be increased in the next budget as well. How much? 20%, 25% is for the government to decide. But your question was related to the impact on the fiscal deficit. There was discussion earlier about the fiscal deficit, and you said initially that the government has been able to walk the talk. It depends how do you define the talk. When we were targeting fiscal deficit of 3%, right, and that's what the law also says, the FRBM says that fiscal deficit should be 3%. So I think that should be the talk, right? But later on, today, we think 6% to 5.9% to be very normal. And we take that 4.5% by 25, 26 as the current talk, so to say. That's not what the law says of the world. But even there, getting there 4.5% is proving to be very difficult. Aditi said, this year you might end up with 6%, which is what I also agree. Next year, in the face of the fact that you would increase the capital expenditure, and it's also a fact that the government would be going for much larger so-called freebies and populist expenditure as well, which is, if you go by what was said during the assembly elections, the Modi guarantees and many other things. And we have many of them. The farmer 6,000 rupees, if it is increased, the free food, if it is increased, gas, other things are increased, then you would have probably much higher expenditure on welfare and freebies as well. So with that, given the situation, containing fiscal deficit next year to anything less than 5.5%, while the government would like to do it according to the glide path, but reality of the situation, to my mind, will make it very difficult. There is another way you can do it. You can show certain receipts to be much higher than what they would really be. So let's see what happens. But if the numbers are real, and these two big items, the Capex as well as the redistribution expenditures are high, in my judgment, it will be difficult for the government to keep it less than 5.5%.
Absolutely. Aditi, one of the reasons why the government has been doing a lot of heavy lifting on capital expenditure is also to usher in the crowding in phenomenon for the private capex cycle to set in. Do you see that happening? Are there any signs of government capex actually crowding in private capex?
Can I just elaborate first on what Sir just said? So if we look at the glide path, 4.5% of GDP for the fiscal deficit, now that we've brought the off-budgetary resources for CapEx on budget, I think we can live with being closer to 4%.
If you do the calculations, it never exceeded 1%.
Yeah.
So those numbers are all available. So the difference between 3 to 6 is 3%, not 1%.
So 4.5 needs to go down to 4. That's basically what you're saying. If we are doing a like-to-like comparison.
3%.
Anyways, so our calculations for the next 2 years basically are that if we want to get from 6% to 4.5%, then we at least need to bridge half the gap next year itself. And that will allow a 10% increase in capex, unless we are able to go in for some sort of aggressive monetization or disinvestment. And straight off the bat, the market doesn't like to see fiscal math being balanced on numbers like that. So 10% is what we think is a doable increase in government capex next year. And if we want to live with a higher fiscal deficit, then every 10 basis points of extra fiscal deficit will allow 32,500 crore of capex. On the private sector part, what we are seeing is that there is real intent to invest in a number of different sectors. But in many cases, what we find is that the announcements being made are realistic. They're not very loud, big bang announcements. They're more realistic, sustainable announcements. So whether we look at traditional sectors like cement and steel, or we look at very consumer-focused sectors like PV, but it's not a very exuberant or a very kind of noisy capex cycle, which grabs more headlines but may not be very sustainable.
Dr. Ashwini Mahajan, do you agree that the government capital expenditure heavy lifting hasn't really unleashed the economic multipliers that they should have?
See, government capital expenditure is of a different kind. Like they are spending on roads, they are spending on railways. So, see, you don't have any much relationship between the two. But nevertheless, we must understand that there is a lot of scope for increase in the capital expenditure. Already the government has been doing it. Despite Corona, despite everything, the government has been able to reach a much higher level of capital expenditure. And today when we are sitting discussing the forthcoming budget, we are in a situation which is a very comfortable one. We expected 10% increase in the revenue, then we are getting 15%. We expected much less for corporate taxes, we are getting much better. We are in a comfortable situation, as I just mentioned about the fiscal deficit. We are in a comfortable position with regard to current account deficit, just 1%. And this twin deficit can do wonders. Right. And the fact that, we should not be worried about the inflation part, because inflation we have already curbed to a great extent by way of independent foreign policy, by way of, better production of agricultural and other food products. And similarly, we are in a much comfortable position with regard to the inflation and the very fact that we are worried about the nominal GDP, the very fact that is coming from the lower inflation, and lower inflation can do wonders about the growth. And you see, if you have lower inflation, you can reduce rate of interest. And if the whole world is worried about the high rate of interest, and if we can do this reverse, so I think we are in a very, very comfortable position, and I humbly disagree with the opinion that the next year is going to be a lower growth period. I feel growth will be higher than this year.
Right. Devendra Pant, interest rates have remained unchanged since February 2023. When do you see that cycle turning?
Likely to remain where they are for at least another one or two MPC committees. A couple of points. A, because if you look at what Governor has said in many conferences also, like it is not touching 4% 1 month and again going back until unless they see the inflation remaining there, right? And at a time, if we are saying high repo rate, but our growth is 7+, right? It is not showing that high repo rate is affecting growth. Right. So what is happening is there's a lot of interplay, there's a lot of noise in the data in the sense like, since the COVID, every first half and second half is telling you a different picture, especially when the growth is concerned. Even if you look at 7.3 for this fiscal, the first half is around 7.7 or so, and the second half is going to be slightly less than 7%. Until unless this stabilize, it is very difficult. So we believe until unless RBI sees the inflation is going to be stable around 4%, I doubt whether they will budge from the present stance.
Absolutely. Subhash Garg, final question to you. The International Monetary Fund has flagged India's debt to GDP ratio, and 100% is exceeding 100% is something that the government should be worried about. The FRBM targets say that ideally it should be around 60%, 40% for the center, and 20% combined states. How much of a worrying sign is this, given the fact that 80% of our debt, government debt, is also in domestic currency? Does that act as a cushion?
So this follows from the fiscal deficit discussion which we have. If you have higher fiscal deficit, both at the center, mainly at the center. By the way, states don't run higher fiscal deficit. They have continuously run lower than 3%, right? So it's primarily in the center. So if you are not able to keep it less than 8 to 9% overall, then the debt, and now with the inflation or the GDP growth remaining at about nominal, at about 8 to 9%, your debt to GDP ratio will not come down. So that is perhaps what is at the back of what the IMF said, and some untoward incident again or something, that is where the stress situation. So my sense is that the debt to GDP ratio is not likely to come down anywhere close to 60%, what the FRBM Act envisages anytime soon. It might persist longer, and if the government continues with very high fiscal deficits, it will take still longer. But your question was about that since a good part of it is in the domestic currency, so it shouldn't be of that much worry to us. By the way, we have very small foreign debt exposure, right? It has always been the case. But that has not prevented our debt to GDP ratio to be very higher. It's a comfort to have it in your currency, so you're not exposed to foreign sort of collateral damage. But as you have very large foreign currency reserves and your foreign borrowing is very small, that kind of risk coming from the foreign side is in any case very small to my mind. So one doesn't need to worry too much about it.
Thank you so much, Aditi Nair, Devendra Pant, Dr. Ashwini Mahajan, and Subhash Chandra Garg for taking the time out and dropping by to have this wonderful conversation with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Would request all the panelists to please stay back for a group photograph. Thank you all the panelists and Gaurav for that very insightful discussion. And definitely we do wait to see what is the actual Capex increase in the upcoming union budget. Moving on, an important macroeconomic indicator is inflation. The government has time and again implemented a number of policies to try to control food inflation. How India manages its food inflation let's listen in directly from the Consumer Affairs Secretary, Mr. Rohit Kumar Singh, in a session with Shweta.
Thank you very much, Meghna, for that. A very warm welcome to Mr. Rohit Kumar Singh, who has been at the forefront of managing India's inflation. Of course, RBI plays a very proactive role in this, but in terms of policy measures that we've seen in the last 1 year, in terms of import bans coming in, introduction of Bharat Dal, Bharat Atta, you name it, Mr. Singh has been at the forefront of this. And I also want to say that as Secretary of Consumer Affairs, he has really revamped the Consumer Affairs Ministry and has brought in a lot of measures that have empowered consumers. There's a consumer helpline that has started, and personally, I was very delighted to hear that, and I've also called on that helpline. So can we have a big round of applause and a very warm welcome to Mr. Rohit Kumar Singh. Mr. Singh, I want to begin by asking you, inflation, I remember 10 years ago, India was facing inflation in double digits. Now we're looking at inflation coming down to finally at 4%, which is pretty much what RBI's medium-term target is. So from double digits to now inflation between 4%, 5%, 6%, and so on, it's been a long journey. As someone who's constantly monitoring this, and we know that inflation is not an economic issue, it's an issue that impacts everybody. Higher prices impacts people in power, it impacts us as citizens, it's a very political issue. So how do you monitor inflation in a country like India, which is so vast and so diverse? Just help us understand that a bit.
Thank you. I feel very important when you ask that. So you're right, it's a humongous task, and we monitor it from across the country. We used to monitor from about 150 odd centers, but last year we realized that unless you collect from all corners and all geographies within the country, you will not be able to get a real picture of how the prices are behaving in the country. So how it works, we have 550 points across the country, and at every day around this time, I get a report on my phone that how the prices of 22 essential commodities are behaving in these 550 points. We have a very, I can call it high-tech dashboard, and we can zero on to a district and to a commodity and see how the prices have, let's say, of rice have behaved in Ranchi for last 5 years, or how the prices of coconut oil have behaved in Kozhikode for last 3 weeks. So we can do all that. So it's 22 commodities, and each place, each location, 3 points. So I have 22 into 3 into 550 data points that are reported every day through mobile app, and we share it in the ministry. And by the way, we are the only source of this primary data, and entities from the research bodies to Reserve Bank of India to everyone else relies on that, and we realize the importance of that. That is why there are many checks and balances at the point of entry of data, at the middleware level, and at the software that we run, so that there are no corrections, there are no deviations, and it's all being reported in a nice way. Now, when we watch...
This is wholesale prices or consumer prices?
This is retail and consumer wholesale. So consumer wholesale has to be understood differently from the mandi wholesale, because for us, wholesale is from where the retailer is buying. So it's a little multi-layered. So I think the consumer wholesaler picks it up from the mandi, and then from there the retailers buy. So we monitor that. We also monitor the mandi prices. We also monitor what is happening overseas, because we have to tweak the import and export regime. So a lot of monitoring is happening every day.
So you are India's only primary source of inflation data that all agencies are relying on.
I would like to believe so.
Wow, that's wonderful. And how often do you upgrade the system? These 550 touch points, is this the current number? Have more touch points been added?
No, so as I mentioned in the beginning, it used to be 170 about 2 years back.
Okay.
And then we realized that unless we collect from all corners of the country, it is not a good reflection of the reality. So from 170 2 years back, it's now 550.
So it's safe to assume that we have a more accurate indicator
Yes.
of inflation
Yeah.
right now than what we probably did
Right.
2 years ago.
So it's, it also depends on specific commodity. For example, the price of, we also do all India averages. And we realize that just the arithmetic average may not be a good thing to report. I'll give you an example. For example, the mustard oil price in Kolkata and mustard oil price in Kochi in Kerala can be different by 150%, because in Kerala it's being used for massage, while in Kolkata it's being used for food. So if you just do an arithmetic averaging, the picture gets skewed. So we have an extrapolation in terms of the consumption pattern across the country, and we do that weighted kind of an average to get a better picture of the reality of the prevailing prices.
Fascinating. So what is the structure for inflation management? I mean, what are the stakeholders that are involved in this whole process?
So it might be a little boring because I'm going to tell you what I do throughout the day. But so we monitor this every day. And every Tuesday, we sit with the representatives of agriculture, the analysts, the trade, and we see how the prices have behaved over the week at various points in the country, how the trade is looking at it, how the producers are looking at it. And then every Wednesday at 5 p.m., we have something called the Interministerial Committee, 4 of us secretaries, agriculture, food, consumer affairs and commerce, and also revenue, because the import-export thing is with them. We sit and we analyze the patterns. And any of us, since we represent different constituencies, if they want an intervention, so intervention is also the level of competence, the structure is decided. Some decisions this committee can take. If there is a higher order intervention, we go to a committee headed by Cabinet Secretary. It's called a COS. And then there is a group of ministers called now the Committee of Ministers, headed by Honorable Home Minister, which has Finance Minister, our Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, Mr. Gadkari, and the Agriculture Minister as members. So it meets almost once a month. And if there is a higher order intervention in terms of, let's say, we want to put a ban is a bad word, on export of a commodity, then it goes there. But it's all data driven. It's driven by evidence. And I know many of us leaning on the liberal economist side would think that government should not be in the business of price controls and actually in the business of doing business. But I would advise you to read a German lady economist, Isabella Weber, who wrote an op-ed in Guardian in 2021, and she said that strategic price control by the government is the most effective way to control inflation. She was abused by fellow economists that time, and she said that's the worst op-ed anybody has written. But now she's a much respected professor at the University of Amherst. She also advises the government of Germany. So my point is that strategic price control, when onion prices were very high, we decided to intervene in retail and sell it at 25 rupees. We did make some losses, but the way we were able to nudge the market, it really worked.
Yeah.
Same thing happened with tomatoes.
Yes.
When in August, the newspapers were printing front page pictures of the tomato dairies of saying 250 rupees or whatever. We said, okay, let's pick it up from the places where it could be sourced. And we deployed thousands of mobile vans and other retail points. And we started selling at 90. Then next week, 80, 70. And we could see that we were nudging the market in the right direction. And of course, there were many other variables at play. and it did work.
Okay.
So the final point I want to make is prices, especially of commodities, are not just a function of supply and demand. There is a lot of messaging involved. There is a lot of nudging involved with players like government can do to help move the market in a positive way. When I say positive, from the consumer point of view.
Sure, sure. So, so talking about the price control measures, there was some controversy around it. You're right. There's a certain group of economists that said that the government should not be in the business of controlling prices. So I want to understand from you, what was the whole thinking behind the import bans that we saw, whether it's dal, whether it is, tomatoes? What was the government's thinking? Because the farmers, when we spoke to them, they were saying that this was their time to book profits, and the government came in and spoiled their party.
So I want to challenge that argument. Okay. And it's not the farmer who was making the profit. It was the trader who was the intermediary, or if I may use a bad word, the middleman, who was making a killing. And if you're talking of onions, what we did, and we still do, when we banned the export of onions because the international price arbitrage was very high and there was a lot of onions flowing out of the country, we said that, okay, if a farmer wants to sell, I'm willing to buy 21 to 24 rupees, depending on, we have a formula. But, so even in the IMC, the committee, the agriculture secretary is always, wanting to protect the interests of the farmer, which is a 13 crore, 14 crore constituency. And we are willing, our objective is to look at the prices for the consumer. So we said that just because some traders want to make a killing and take advantage of this difference between prices in Bangladesh and prices in India, we can't let a lot of onions flow out of the country. By the way, Turkey, Egypt, and many other countries that produce onions of the type that we eat with a lot of pungents, they've all banned exports. Pakistan did not, and I have a report in my phone from the Dawn, this published in Karachi 3 days back.
Yeah.
Onion prices in Pakistan 3 days back were 240 rupees a kg, of course, in their currency. And now they are, of course, abusing India and now going to ban exports. So the whole idea is to preempt, to take action in advance. Because in commodities, if you delay your decision, even by a couple of days, you're dead.
Yeah.
So we need to act promptly. And I think this three-layered structure of the interministerial committee comprising the secretaries, then the committee of secretaries headed by the cabinet secretary, and the group of ministers headed by Honorable Home Minister. Sometimes this can work in a night, all three layers. Because
really? So the permissions, you have to take approvals from different...
Yes.
And when you decided to ban exports and increase imports of tur dal and so on, how quick was the process? Take us through that.
So it's very quick. We look at the data. Of course, we have to present the evidence before the respective committees. So you present it to the group of ministers that compared to the same period last year, this year export is 170% of that, and it is flowing. The production is not as good, and the rabi sowing may have challenges because of El Nino and other effects. So you have to plan in perspective. Because you have to see what is going to happen 3 months from now. And I didn't tell about that, but since I'm sitting here, let me flaunt that a bit. We also do predictive analysis. We have algorithms that can predict the prices of at least the 8 major commodities 30 days from now, 45 days from now, and 60 days from now. Of course, based on legacy data. So we have this rich base of data through which we predict. And since we've been using it now, this algorithm for last about a year, we've now realized that root mean square error is now converging to a very low number. That means we are able to predict that onion prices in Lasalgaon will be X plus minus a small delta 30 days from now. And that works.
So it's worked. It's worked so far.
More or less.
So, is there a difference in your strategy between, say, commodities and perishables?
Of course. Very good question. So the way we handle pulses, cereals, and staple, that's different. But when it comes to onions, tomatoes, it's perishable, it's fast moving, and there are storage issues, and there are Let's take tomatoes. Tomato, across India, they produced at different times, different geographies have different harvest periods. Pickings are multiple somewhere pickings are just two. So you have to analyze that. Like the biggest mandis are Kolar and Madanapalli in Andhra Pradesh. And then you realize that if that is falling short, what about Shahjapur in Indore and Alwar in Rajasthan? And how will the Azadpur Mandi in Delhi will get? So sometimes if market is not letting it happen because there are vested interests who want to increase the prices, we step in through our agencies like NAFED, NCCF, and we say you procure from the low price regions, and we are willing to support you and increase the availability in the market. So I think the two fundamental principles that we work on is availability and affordability. And if you're able to manage the two in an optimal manner, I think food inflation can be managed well.
So we're living in the times of Atmanirbharta. Atmanirbhar Bharat is our goal right now. How do you, as someone who's at the forefront of driving policy when it comes to managing food inflation, so how do you balance Atmanirbharta and global supply chains?
Very good question. So let's take pulses. India produces 275 to 280 lakh tons of pulses every year, and we also consume a similar number. But the composition within that pulse basket, like 50% of it is chana, but we don't consume it that much. So the difference between what we consume and what we produce in tur dal, in moong dal, in urad dal, so there is a gap. So of course, I'll give you an example. For arhar or tur dal, we consume 44 lakh tons, but we produce only 35. So where is this gap of 9 going to come from? So there are two geographies. Some comes from Myanmar, some comes from East African countries. So we have to watch the production numbers in Myanmar and East Africa, because we have to get it from there. Otherwise, prices will shoot up here. So in terms of the aggregate Atmanirbharta in pulses, it's already there. But if you see the components, we are still dependent. So, for example, in urad, which is black matpe, we are totally dependent on Myanmar. Our requirement of 8 to 9 lakh tons comes from Myanmar. But Myanmar can be a volatile geography. So we realize that we have to diversify our risk. So we are in strong talks with Brazil and Argentina, because agroclimatically they can produce these pulses. And I'm very happy.
Why can't we do that in India?
Oh, we do that, but India, the geography is limited. So the farmer has a choice that he or she can, switch to another crop which is more paying. So we have seen a lot of it happening. It changing from pulses to cotton and soybean, and it changes every year. So because we have limited geography, and the income levels are growing, people are consuming more protein, the pulse consumption is going up. So we need, every country needs import,
so you're in talks with Brazil right now?
So I'm very happy to report that already 3,000 tons this year we got from Brazil. It's a good start, small number, but it's a good start. So our dependence on one geography, we are diversifying, mitigating that risk.
Reduces. You've also launched a whole host of brands in the last 1 year, whether it's Bharat Atta, Bharat Rice, and so on. What's the thought process behind it? Because this is a government that said it should be minimum government, maximum governance. But now we are also eating government-owned brands, ka atta and chawal and all of that. So just explain the whole thought process and philosophy behind this.
So I think it's part of maximum governance only, not government.
Okay.
Because you see, last year we had robust chana crop, so we have 40 lakh tons in our buffer. So what do? You can pump it into the market. It also gets spoiled after a while. So you can do it in wholesale. You can do it in retail. If you do it in wholesale, what do? You do OMSs, open market auctions, through NAFED or whatever agency you have. But the guy who's bidding in the wholesale, now you are at his or her mercy, because he may choose not to sell it. He can, have it in no stock. Of course, there's cost of holding a commodity. So we decided that let's intervene in retail. And through our agency, we have a good cooperative system, NAFED, NCCF, then the state government agencies of Maharashtra, Gujarat, and other. So we incorporated them into our system, and we created a layered structure. And we said, out of this 40 lakh tons, let's try with 5 lakh tons and sell this in market at a rate which is at a little differential from the market rate, and let's see how the market behaves. And then we realized, of course, we do a concurrent evaluation also, whether it's working or not. We've now realized that retail intervention works much better than wholesale intervention. In wholesale intervention, you're still at the mercy of the middleman. So a good solution is a hybrid. You do retail intervention also and wholesale intervention also. And we have seen that by selling Bharat Dal at 60 rupees, the market price has really moved. The gap has narrowed.
And how are you ensuring quality checks for that?
So quality check is when it is procured, it has to be as per norms. We call it FAQ, fair average quality, in terms of the content of the moisture. And when the agencies take it from us and then they get it milled, and then when they pack it in 1 kg or 30 kg packs or 5 kg packs, then they also have to ensure quality. And by the way, this is being sold in normal retail, right from our mobile vans to Reliance stores to the D-Marts or whatever have you.
You manage the distribution.
Yes, and I am very happy to report that the December chana dal sale in the country, Bharat Dal's contribution was 25%. We've captured. And
okay, that is brilliant. that's quite something.
This is not by force, because you're giving a choice. So if you go
without
to
aggressive advertising, because
without aggressive advertising.
How many of you are familiar with Bharat Dal? Nobody. Okay. We have a few people.
So I've just given the last sentence that in a Reliance store, you will see a Bharat Dal with huge 60 rupees written on the cover itself, sitting next to the other dal, and people are buying that dal. So if there were concerns on quality, they would not touch that. And we are talking of, middle class.
But I wonder what FMCG companies have to say. I believe we have some FMCG players here also. So you're introducing more competition in the market,
which is good.
Which is good for the consumer. Yes, absolutely. So I also want to talk to you about several measures that the Consumer Affairs Ministry has taken to empower the consumer, and the regulations that you're coming out. What's in the anvil? What can we expect going forward? What can industry expect when it comes to tighter regulations?
So, this whole thing of ease of doing business, we are totally for it because it's government's mandate. But when you facilitate business towards, easier systems and let's call it decriminalization and easing of the way of doing business, you also have to ensure that consumers' rights are being adequately protected. And I'll give you an example. When we were buying from corner stores, from mom and pop shops, the Kirana store, there was a relationship between the buyer and the seller.
Right.
He knew your chachas and uncles and aunties, and if something went wrong, he would be willing to replace it. Now, both with the brick and mortar malls and these huge e-commerce stores, the power equation between the buyer and the seller has become really skewed. The buyer is a small fellow, and the sellers are these huge mega malls and these e-commerce stores. So now it is more and more upon us to develop systems so that the consumer is not taken for a ride, unless you are Uber and Ola, of course. Then what do you do? So right from when you go to an e-commerce site, right from the search algorithm, which has to be fair, I don't know, 1 year back, we were really worried. So I sat with my minister and said, Sir, aap bhi search karo. We searched for product X on our respective phones, and product X and product Y, we're sitting together. And first 10 results, and I can name the company in Amazon, were all from Cloudtail.
Yeah.
So all this talk about, this e-commerce platform empowering the chota seller,
right,
is all, you can see the proof of the pudding is there. So we said, you can't that, because if my product is going to be listed at 193. No consumer is going to buy that, number one. Number two, when you're buying on a platform, you're not looking at the seller. You're just looking at the credentials of the platform. You see, those reviews. You see those 4.5 stars, and you think, yeah, it's a good product. Maybe I'll buy it. You don't know who the seller is. But who is going to authenticate those stars? So we developed standards in BIS for systems to manage fake reviews. And next month, we are toying with the idea of making it compulsory that all e-commerce websites should have systems where they manage fake reviews. Third and most important, last month, we issued guidelines for dark patterns. Now, what are dark patterns? Dark patterns are manipulative practices deployed by e-commerce platforms to manipulate the consumer behavior. You are being nudged in a direction where you don't want to go. Basket sneaking. You buy something of 5,000 rupees. When you're checking out, you see 5 rupees added, being human. Some insurance, some donation. You didn't ask for it.
That's right.
Of course, if you want, you can do it. Airline ticket. You're buying the ticket, travel insurance is added automatically. So we are saying, please don't add it. This is, if you want to subscribe to a service, 1 click. If you want to unsubscribe, 13 clicks. They will not let you out. So these are all, for a person, sometimes you say, "Arey, chodo yaar, rehne do, har mahine credit card se chala jayega." But why?
Correct.
Who will protect?
Yeah.
And then misleading advertisements. I was just telling your colleague that the largest shirt manufacturer in India advertised that if you wear my shirt, you will not get COVID. I said, "Bhai, what is this?" Everybody's words, number one, toothpaste. IS coaching centers. Coaching centers started in 2015. You are putting the picture of a guy who became IS in 2001. Arey bhai, tumhara center hi nahi khula tha.
Have you seen 12th fail?
I have seen 12th fail.
Yes.
We have seen 12th. So it's all happening, but greenwashing. Everybody, consumers like all of us, are willing to pay a premium for green products.
Yeah,
We all care for the environment. But greenwashing is a new phenomenon where people are advertising, putting all those green dots and putting stuff in the recycled packages, but the product is actually not green.
You've done a research on this.
Yes. So I am coming up with guidelines. The guidelines are ready with industry consultation. We're coming up with guidelines next fortnight that this is greenwashing. Please do not fool the consumer, because consumer is paying 1.2 to 1.5 times extra because he or she thinks it's a green product.
Right.
But the product is not green.
So is this only for detergents you're doing, or you're
No,
also going to look at food products?
Greenwashing is a term which is used for everything.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So food products as well, for everything you're coming
I'll-
up with guidelines.
I'll tell you a little 15-second anecdote where it terms emanated from, and we have all faced. So there was a guy, American guy, who went to a hotel in Fiji, and it said that if you don't ask your towels to be washed every day, that means you're saving the planet. You're not. So it all started there. So he coined the term greenwashing because hotels were making a fool of the customers, saying that if you don't want your chaddar changed or towel washed, you're saving them. You're not saving the environment. That is where it all started. It's a way to fool. So you go to any 5-star hotel, they will have these little signs where they're asking you, not to rattle their balance sheet by asking you to do little things. It's not fair.
Yeah.
It should be the choice, and you're nudging him in that direction.
Yeah.
So that's not fair.
They're almost, I think there is a bit of a moral lecturing there also.
Yes.
That if you do this, you're wasting resources.
Moral lecturing, and then, just 2 left, gone. So I don't know what's the name of the site. It's a copy of the US, the price is right. Some Tol Mol Ke Bol or some.
Groupon? No.
Something which comes on television, and every day it will play that this is the last sari and the 200 rupees, buy it. And then we send the notice to the company, and we realized that it was a recorded thing. So every day the same thing video was being played.
Wow.
And how can you say every day just last piece, 2 pieces left, gone. I think it was Tol Mol Tol or some Naap Tol or something like that. So we find them 10 lakhs of rupees, and they stopped it.
Thank you. I think that's.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Let's hear it for Mr. Singh.
Thank you.
It's one last question.
Of course.
What's the comfortable level of inflation for the ministry that you're working with?
I have no number in mind, But I'll tell you, so inflation numbers, I mean, all the great economists are sitting here. Numbers can be very tricky, difficult to understand. कल के अखबार में I read कि ये बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ गया है, 5 point something 6, I don't know what the number was. And I realized कि मेरी prices तो कम हो रही हैं, तो ये बढ़ कैसे रहा है? And then I have the table if you want proof that prices are coming down of my commodities. And we are 45% of the CPI. And then you realize, no, this is December on December. So there's no logic of December on December. And you know, you tell me December over November, November over October. So I don't know what happened last December. So don't put it on the front page of all newspapers that, you know, year on year, December it is this much. No, it's an incorrect way of representing. And I also am meeting the governor on next Tuesday. We do engage with RBI very closely because, as sir was saying, the decision by MPC on the interest rates is heavily dependent on the food inflation numbers.
Right.
So we do engage with the MPC a lot. Me and my team sitting here, we engage with them every month, and so we say that because you know, they once told us in September that, Rohit, your onion price is going to be 100. Be careful. We said, no, we'll not let it go beyond 65, 70. And it didn't go.
So are we with elections coming? Any red flags you've been asked to watch out for?
Nothing to do with elections. It's pure. It's only consumer prices.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr.
You're
Singh.
welcome.
It's been our honor and privilege to have you here and discuss in such great detail about how India manages its inflation. I think it's been a bit of a primer for all of us. Thank you very much, and we wish you the very best. We do hope that you keep empowering the consumers and keep sending out those notices against dark practices.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Please stay back for a photograph. Thank you, Mr. Singh and Shweta, for that very detailed discussion on how India does predictive analysis on crucial commodities to preempt measures to tackle inflation. Moving on, and do not please the audience, I hope you all are tweeting with the hashtag #MCPolicyNext. Next panel is the one that is very important. India aims to become the third largest economy by 2028. But there are grave concerns about the low share of women's participation in the labor force. The Indian economy has grown more than 10 times since 1990, but its female workforce participation has fallen from 30% in 1990 to 19% as of 2021, according to World Bank data. Enhanced participation of women in the formal sector is a must, as it has the potential to accelerate India's growth dramatically. And that is what our next panel is on. From more women in the parliament to workplaces, how and why India needs to fix its skewed gender ratio. We the women, India's next growth engine. I would like to invite Moneycontrol multimedia editor Sonal Mehrotra to moderate this session.
Hello and good evening, everybody. It's very nice to have all of you here. Thank you so much for everybody who's been patiently listening in for all this while. And, you know, we've spent the last few hours talking about India's $10 trillion run. And one thing we can all agree upon is it cannot be reached if the participation of women in the workforce in development is as skewed as that being represented in this room, right? So this has to change. So over the next 30 minutes, we will focus on women-led development. As in India's development landscape, just to sort of give you a context over there, the role of women stands at a very focal point. There's an interesting time at which we are having this conversation. Think about it. Our current president is a woman. Our finance minister is a woman. Women are leading your homes, but also taking you all the way to moon, to the sun even now, right? And very recently, we've had G20, where India again sort of was key in pushing women-led development as a key goal. India has also witnessed a transformative wave. By that I mean that initiatives like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, rise of women-centric entrepreneurial ventures, you'll see some very dynamic women in some time from now. They are painting sort of, if I can say, strokes of change. But yet, the canvas is far from complete. As we navigate the discourse on women-led development, in India at least, we must scrutinize these efforts. We need to applaud progress, but we also need to dissect the gaps. We need to understand what is required in this very intricate masterpiece of women development. I've been told empowerment is a bad word. I'll tell you why in just a moment from now. But having said that, having given you guys a brief idea of what's coming up next, let me just get my power-packed panel up on stage. Please join me and let's show some enthusiasm. Men and women in this room, please. Let's have Bansuri Swaraj, please. She's a lawyer with Supreme Court. Please join us on stage. Also, Shazia Ilmi, spokesperson for the BJP. Lekha Chakravarti, she's a professor at NIPFP. Anisha Singh, founder for She Capital. Shairi Chehel, founder and chairperson for Mahila Money. And also, Ayushi Gudbani, founder for Feeble Street. All right. Hello, ladies. Very nice to have you all here with us. The reason I had this little piece before we sort of got started with this was that a lot of times when we talk about development, a gender lens is not really seen as something very, not in the main course discussion at least, let me put it like that, right? And I want to first go to Lekha now because Lekha is doing something absolutely path-breaking, something I think we all need a bit of an education on. Now, Lekha is done something called, or is pioneering this effort of gender budgeting. Now, before you start thinking it's got to do with tax cuts in cosmetics and leather bags and shoes and all of that, it's not that. Gender budgeting, how we can include that in sectors like infrastructure, in sectors like, I was told, even energy, is something really path-breaking. So before we begin, let's just get an idea from Lekha on how does this work and how did the need arise to actually address it at that level?
Oh, thank you, Sonam. This is my 4th meeting and your energy is contagious. Thank you for that. When we talk about this gender budgeting, actually we were pushing the agenda beyond the economic growth. We have to go beyond the growth because now the concern and the talks are about the GDP, but we need to take the question beyond, GDP. Then only it gets translated into better human development or gender development. So that's the point where this gender budgeting, it's a powerful public financial management tool to address the gender inequality concerns. But if you look at the budget, policymakers, we started this work in 2000, then, Ministry of Finance was not ready to take gender, lens because they spoke that it's not our cup of tea. Gender is something which micro, what we have to do with gender. So that was a take, and you can connect to it in central bank. Any central bank governor talks about gender, not it, right? So that was a case when NIPFP started working on this gender budgeting. Then slowly the agenda started moving and we started getting into the social infrastructure, health, education. Then they asked us to be satisfied with that because infrastructure is gender neutral. So we need not look into,
It's not.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not because I was networking with a few newfound men friends with you and they told that you can't network after sunset. We can. So that was the case, but this is a public policy failure. If women cannot network after sunset, it's nothing to do with women, it's a public policy failure. And this acceptance was done in India long back when the girl was brutally murdered in a public transport, in a public space.
You're talking about the Nirbhaya.
Absolutely, and this was a public policy failure. But over the years, if you look into that question, with the same roads, there is no street lights, those things have not improved. But there was a policy space, a beautiful policy space, an analytical framework to look into these questions, and as you pointed out, beyond cosmetics, that's for women. So that was a way, finance minister used to announce things. So if you ask me if there is a change over the years, we have a promising framework. We looked into the energy infrastructure. We have, clean fuel for the women.
Give me an example. We want to understand the end case use. You're sitting in a room of mostly men, some women, some very dynamic women, and you're discussing this. How does the end usage of, say, for example, gender budgeting in the infrastructure space work?
Of course, take the energy example. Like if you look into the statistics, more women and children die out of indoor air pollution than malaria. So how we can address that through the gender lens in the budget? So we provided the clean fuel to the women in the low-income households. Because otherwise it's pathetic that your life expectancy is going down because you're making food for your child in a poorly ventilated house. So providing clean fuel, that's a wonderful example how you can put a gender lens into the energy policy. So these kind of questions came up over the time. But it was never there when we started talking about what is this gender lens in the budget. Yeah, this is a powerful example.
I think, like I said in the introduction as well, we are at a very interesting time to have this conversation, really. India has, if there are various steps, if I could define it like that, India has always had women in the forefront. We also have a women reservation bill. We have a very active, fiery debate upon menstrual leaves. And everybody, I'm sure, has an opinion on that. We'll get to it also in a while. But as we talk about more and more policies coming into way, I want to sort of reflect upon how does it translate into empowering that woman who's in need for, say, capital, empowering women who are entrepreneurs, empowering women who are wondering, I really don't know how to navigate through the system, right? So let me bring Nisha into this and understand you've been a serial, you've done various ventures, but now you do something very exciting. You run a fund that only looks at women and wants to give them and wants to facilitate and open doors to them. You've been, I'm sure, to several meetings, boardrooms, where you must have been asked this question, what is the need of a women-only fund? Could you tell this group, enlighten us, tell us how those conversations go and what's your response?
I love it. You're trying to make the panel spicy. All right. So, yeah, as Sonal said, I'm a third-time round founder. My third venture is She Capital, which is a fund, venture fund, and now I invest in startups. Prior to this, I used to run a startup called My Dollar. And before that, I had another company, which was a digital marketing company I sold to the US. When I did go out, and I talk about this very openly now, that the hardest stint, you'd think by the third time round, you'd be okay with being a founder and it's going to be easy. Actually, raising money for female founders was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Because one, we were just, every time I went, everybody was like, it's such a great cause. We were just labeled a cause. We're not a cause. A venture fund is going to give you back money. It's going to return investment. But for the longest time, women were considered in the bucket of cause. And then I'd hear stuff like, why would you want to invest in women? They have cat fights. So, so those kind of things behind closed doors, while a lot of it was lip service, and it's okay. I mean, those times. So I'm not going to dwell on that because the fact of the matter is this was in 2018. I think we've come such a great way since then. It's a world of a difference. There are women founders and phenomenal ones that have proven their worth. You can see they've listed publicly. There are women who are raising amazing amounts of money but building phenomenal businesses, right? Solid businesses. So I think one of the things that we were lacking was we didn't have enough role models. And especially for women, if you have role models, and this is a study that shows that you will find more women coming into the workforce and women coming into entrepreneurship. So we needed those role models. So I actually like the ecosystem and where we sit now. I think the startup ecosystem is, I'm absolutely bullish about where we are. I think it is the place where we are going to change the gender gap and cross the chasm. We are 117 years per se behind men. And that is going to change. And if it changes, I think it's going to change from the startup ecosystem where we're closing the gap fairly quickly. You're seeing a lot more women entrepreneurs come in. You're seeing a lot of them build phenomenal businesses. This side is startup heavy, and so they're building phenomenal businesses, and I'm just happy to be a part of this ecosystem and be a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about women entrepreneurs, let me bring in Ayushi now. She's the founder and CEO for Fable Street. Ayushi, you've run a very successful company for about almost a decade now. Yeah, almost a decade now. Same question to you. What do you think? So all of us agree, I think, on the point that we are at this really phenomenal stage in the movement. Some people call it feminism, some people call it women empowerment. It really depends on what lens you want to look at it.
I absolutely hate the word empowerment. I think we should take it out of, women should take it out of the dictionary. I don't even think it's it's a guy thing.
Yeah.
That word needs to come. We are powered. We do not need this. We keep bringing this on ourselves, which is empowered. No, we are pretty powered. We don't need this word.
I mean, yeah. But
Yeah.
can you finish?
Why
did you finish your question?
No, I was saying, so we hate the word cause, we hate the word empowerment. We really want to understand how to navigate through this system, and who better than you to sort of understand and learnings from your journey.
You know, I had an interesting journey for myself before even I ventured into Fable Street. I think in general, I've been a super high achiever throughout my entire course of, high school to undergrad. I was a topper in an engineering college full of men. I was a topper in B school at IIM Calcutta, full of men again. So, for me, at no point in time, gender held me back, ever. And that did reflect in my self-assurance when I went and spoke to the investors. Anisha, I'm sure you would have seen that enough in the journeys, right? So I do feel that, if somewhere we can do change a mindset shift in women, and that is why I'm so glad that she mentioned don't say empowered and all of that. We're fully powered. It is a lot in our minds on how we want to change and drive the world. And we are, at least a lot of us women who are educated with a good pedigree in some shape and form, have real access. We should be the one driving change. So that's my journey, and that's what I believe over here. Having said that, I also have seen the other side of it, where women genuinely need support and they need upliftment. And it could be in the lower strata, it could be a lot in the other areas as well. And in that case, I do believe that we do need representation in all shapes and forms on the top. You need role models. I run a startup which has 60% women leaders and 70% women in workforce. It is what it is because I am running it. Not because, and we are a super commercial, profit-focused company who's aiming to become $1 billion business. So that is the cause that we are running. So there's nothing in terms of aspiration that's holding us.
How many, can you give me a gender divide in your company? What's the ratio?
As I said, right, so we are basically about 70% women overall, and 60% in leadership. So that's, yeah, and that is purely because we have the role models around this. And it is true, be it in politics, be it in any sphere, and you need that. And that's where I do believe that you need to create some structural aspects, but beyond that, I think we need to stand up for ourselves. We need to have a mindset shift for who we are and then run and charge.
So, the interesting thing about this panel is that you have women like these, but you also have somebody here, Shairi Chahal, who's the founder and chairperson for Mahila Money. Now, Shairi deals with women of a very different mindset, right? These women don't make it to podiums. These women don't have access. And while we celebrate and we detest words, and while we say, okay, diversity, let's not call it diversity, let's call it what it is, there shouldn't be such a huge gap. Take us through what's happening on the other side of the conversation here. You, essentially, also, I would like to educate our audiences as well. You help a lot of women, and to give an example, really, women in smaller towns, in smaller cities who want to do something and they don't have access to finance, they come to you, and where do you take them then?
Thank you. So just to give you a quick context, I think the thesis of our work is very simple. It says internet is the power engine of the economy today. All great companies are using technology and internet to get built. About 15 years ago, I started my first company, which was an internet platform for women, connecting them to employment. And I think when we started, India internet base was 10 million users. Men, women put together was 10 million users. Today, we are sitting at about 800 million users, out of which 350 million are women who have come online for the first time. So this is, I think this is a policy impact, because a lot of things happen to make this happen. We're also one of the fastest growing digital payments economy in the world. So there is a little policy context to this conversation. And I think before I tell you what we do, it's important to look at this in abstraction. Or let's say you take India as a whole country. Only 17% of our workforce is women. Only 3% of our leadership is women. Less than 10% credit goes to women. So if you look at all the loans given by all banks, all NBFCs, only 10% of that amount goes to women, in spite of a very healthy microfinance sector, where 99% of the loans go to women and has perhaps the healthiest balance sheet in the financial services sector. What we are doing is very simple. There's a whole generation of women who have come online in the last 5-10 years. They all use a phone, they all use digital payments, they all use networks like Instagram, and they're all building a business you and I use on a daily basis. A beauty parlor, a home boutique, a yoga studio, a boutique, apparel boutique, a D2C brand, somebody you probably see pitching on Shark Tank India. Now, this is a segment that financial services segment doesn't serve today. They are not microfinance. They're not served by an HDFC or an SBI because they're small business owners. They don't qualify. They're new to credit. What we've done is we've put together a fintech, which is a digital platform that underwrites this user base so that the capital connection can be made between this entrepreneur and the bank and an NBFC that has that money. So what we're really doing is, I think, to move economic engines and social engines, I believe incentives matter and capital matters. In a country that's being driven by entrepreneurship at all levels, so at one level we have our unicorns, but at every gully, every nooker, we have somebody who runs a small business right from her phone, right from her home, right from her shop. Exactly. There are, yes, so we're a less than 2-year-old venture. We already serve 4,000 locations in this country. And we think that this can become an engine of economic growth, but also social change, because every time an entrepreneur grows, she has more spending power, she's employing more money, she's buying more goods, and she's also sending the right message out into the world. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, that's great. So just to sort of, and why that is so important to understand is that, again, getting back to the journey that women have seen. So things, the journey of women development can be sort of divided into two phases, the pre-pandemic and the post-pandemic phenomena. Post the pandemic, we saw a lot of women who did not return to the workforce. So forget about acing that number. We've not even been able to match it so far. So that's challenge at one level. On the other, we've got a lawyer in the Supreme Court, also a very feisty woman who has, who's been doing a lot in that sense. I just want to understand, Basuri, since you're coming from the Supreme Court, we were talking about it earlier. We are going to have the first woman Chief Justice of India in 2027? Yes. 2027?
2027, yes.
Isn't it long overdue?
Long time overdue. Long time overdue. But I think it can be explained. So the journey to become the Chief Justice of India is a very long and arduous one. And what was happening earlier was that the social and the economic conditions were not conducive for women to join the legal profession. And those who did dare to join it Unfortunately, because of familial obligations or because of economic obligations, etc., there was a very huge dropout rate. Because in order to become the CGI, like I said, it's a very long and arduous journey. Either you need to be a practicing lawyer who gets elevated to High Court directly, and then you are basically elevated to Supreme Court as a CGI in terms of seniority, or you join the judicial services very early on, and then you sort of rise up in the ranks. Unfortunately, the pool of talent was, I should say, for the lack of a better word, scarce. But that is changing. That is changing. In fact, what is very encouraging is that 50% of law students today in law schools are women. And I have to tell you something, Sonal. We keep talking about the pandemic. Believe it or not, but for the legal industry, it was a blessing in disguise. Because it started the VC hearings. It started that you could actually take care of your family, and you could appear in court, especially in litigation. You could appear in court, do your hearing for that particular day from the comfort of your home. And what's wonderful is that the government has supported these efforts of doing e-courts and VC hearings even post-pandemic. And great credit goes, of course, to the Modi government for facilitating it and ensuring that right from trial court, high court and Supreme Court, there is infrastructure to enable sort of digital hearings and VC hearings. And I must say, great credit to our current Chief Justice of India, Dhananjay Chandrachud, the Honorable Chief Justice of India, who have sort of sensitized his colleagues and made sure that right down to trial court, you are permitting people to actually appear from the comfort of this home, which means that automatically there will be a much, in fact, it might even stop the dropout rate of women completely. So yes, kudos, Justice Nagaratna is going to become the first Chief Justice of India in 2027, and she's, of course, breaking and shattering the proverbial glass ceiling.
Yeah, true. But yes, please, we can be a little more encouraging on that, yeah? The reason I ask this question is to sort of come to the point where how important really is representation. The question that we're asking today is that, yes, we have, like I said in my opening remark, yes, we have a woman president, yes, we have a woman finance minister, we'll have a woman CGI also very soon. But Shazia has been waiting very patiently, so let me go to her next and understand this. Shazia, women as an electoral vote bank, I think, again, just to sort of not reflect on what's happened, but moving forward in this conversation, they've always been identified as one. But do you think time has now come to ensure that policy making happens in that realm? And how do you really see that gap also bridging it?
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great listening to all of you, fellow women leaders in different spheres. It's a very important question that you asked, Sonal, about bridging the gap, because as you said, the challenges are many. Now, women are a huge base for when it comes to a force as voters. And I think more and more political parties are aware of it, which is why, a lot of successes, electoral successes, would be attributed to women voters. Ladli Behna Yojana, whether it's Mudra Yojana, where 70% beneficiaries are women, and of course all the various schemes where women are really at the center point of development. So we have to go beyond semantics, but semantics matter. Why? Because women's development is so different from women-led development. And when the dynamics are so skewed in this male-female situation, you really need to relook at and see it through the gender lens, which is why the role of important women leaders. Now, there was a point in Rajya Sabha when all the women were there because of their fathers, father-in-law, or husbands. And you look at the situation today, it's changing. You have a Nirmala Sitharaman, giving it off, a full powerhouse, budget after budget. You heard Smriti Irani just gobsmacked the person who asked the question on menstruation and gave some womanly wisdom there. So when women from smaller towns make it and fight for more and say we want a better deal for ourselves, this is not enough, this will not do. I think, you know, there is a silent revolution which is underway. And I think we are witnessing that revolution. A lot is changing. There are winds of change. I come from Kanpur. Chamanganj is where I come from, which is like a complete Muslim ghetto.
Girl, I can bet.
Oh, Kanpur girl, here's to Kanpur. And I cannot tell you the aspirations women have. It's changed so much from the idea of just being a teacher at most or a principal in school to a doctor at most. I mean, they want to be
bank wali naukri.
Bank
That was
wali
supposed
naukri.
to be a very
So
safe
to
thing.
being DJs, you know, to being radio jockeys, to being television news anchors, to flying, so lots of unique things are happening. And I think there is, women are clamoring for more, and I can see that. But I feel that the ecosystem is responding, and not a lot more needs to be done. You know, we used to have this, sarpanchs had always had it. At the village panchayat level, there was always reservation. But we often saw that though the face of power was feminine, but the actual repository of power was not the woman there, but her husband. So that's why panchpatis were actually running the panchayats. Now for that, we have to ensure that the same thing doesn't happen in this 33% reservation that we're talking about, seeing many more women, because right now only 15% of the Lok Sabha members are women. Only 12% of Rajya Sabha members are women. You look at Scandinavian countries where the percentage goes up to 45. Now, clearly it's too adverse to even talk about, and it's shameful. Though we started at 5%, despite. So now what is there? So a woman has to change from just being important as a voter to becoming important as a candidate. Winnability. Winnability is what the parties keep telling you about. And for that, the society should also help in and say, no, we are looking at also women as winnable, fiery leaders, and we don't just need men to lead the way. So we need to have grassroots workers rising, working upwards, and us creating that ecosystem to help them and hold their hand. And I really think women are so ready. If you see everywhere, even if you see across the spectrum, you know, agrarian culture, if you look at agriculturalists, some phenomenal work. Some of our women farmers are really kicking.
From farmers to NASA all the way, like I said, so
you know,
many
while women in
yeah.
Iran were shedding the burqas, and while there were some secularists, this left liberal lobby, wearing burqas to show solidarity, quietly and not so far away, there's a Nigar Shaji, a Muslim woman who's leading the solar mission. And that is where it matters. So there are great stories. So more and more models, real life models. And it's just not about, and also about the dominant culture. That it's just not about looking good and the mass media being about beautiful women. You know, when you attribute only beauty and youth to women and power and money to men. But more and more women who matter in terms of premiers, in terms of presidents, in terms of sportswomen, in terms of women entrepreneurs. So I think that stereotype must change. And I think the popular culture and the Hindi film songs should also work accordingly. Because you have to go beyond "Main cheez badi hu mast mast." You know.
I think rightly said. See, Shazia has covered so many different aspects of it, but I want to go back to Women's Reservation Bill, so important. Can I ask you the most obvious question, which is on everybody's mind right now? What's the delay? When do we see it actually roll out? Are we waiting for elections post that? Can you drop us?
No, so it's been spelled out very clearly in the parliament, and all these misgivings have been answered. And because there would be a delimitation process, because right now if you announce it straight away, now how many of the existing MPs, I'm talking about all parties, would agree for their particular seats to be declared as reserved for women? Now they would be very contentious. It could be BJP, it could be Samajwadi Party, it could be RJD, it could be JDU, it could be AAP. So when there are strong leaders, some women too, they would say, why would you want to reserve it and on what basis? So post delimitation, so I think the next session onwards, we will actually have a 33% reservation. There would be 888 seats now. So also the new parliament is made for more members. The population has grown so much more. If you look at, I will not quote the Malthus theory of, development, but you just see how the population has grown. So we need many more representatives to reflect the will of the people in terms of the size of the constituencies. So I guess, so this is something that should have happened long time ago. But finally it's happened, and this, as I'm told by policy experts, that this was the best way and the shortest way. It could not have been done in a year's time. Many would argue it could have happened earlier. The Delimitation Commission should have been on work, and the census should have been working on it earlier. But well, this is how it is, and I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, it is. But the key question here at the moment, and why don't you, Basri, come in on this one as well, is about representation here, right? How important is that? We talked about panchpatis, so to say, right? How do we ensure that the next leg of parliamentarians who reach the parliament are women who reach the parliament are more empowered? Like, what can we do at this level? How do we, it'll be more of a social change, is what I'm sort of getting at.
It's already begun. It's already begun at the policy level. So you spoke about, Sonal, you spoke about Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. You know, the gender ratio in India is finally, it has stopped being skewed after decades. For the first time. From Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, we went to Jan Dhan, which meant that more than 55% of bank accounts which are open today are owned by women. After that, you have other, something that Sariji, you know, Mahila money that you're doing on the private side, the government is doing it with PM Swanidhi Yojana or Mudra Yojana, which means that you are actually bringing economic empowerment to women. And I'll tell you, and that is why the narrative has shifted from women empowerment, a word that we all hate on the panel, to women-led development, which means you're talking today about empowerment in the context of empowering the nation. We are talking about Viksit Bharat by 2047, and women are going to be the architects of that future.
You know, I'm told it's time to wrap up, but I'll take last few comments from everybody, and just to, there's so much we need to speak about, especially the pay gap, which is a nagging issue across industries, across, you know, sectors. So I'll just take closing comments now, starting with you.
It needs to be addressed. Will get addressed when there are more women in leadership and on the top fighting for it, and also women bottoms up are asking for it.
I think till such time men are deciding who gets paid what unilaterally, I think pay gap will continue to exist. We need more women on the table, every table, to make sure this is an equal decision.
Well, I think change is here, and it's inevitable, all right? So it's already happening. As Bansuri said, we're seeing that change happen. Now, either we can go with it, and I encourage every woman actually to go with it and encourage each other and build each other up, and that's going to change everything, right? More women on the workforce will bring more in, pay gap automatically down. So I think that needs to happen, and the change is already happening. There's nothing that can be done to stop it. It's a rolling ball.
That's a very positive note. Quickly, this side now.
So I tend to disagree a little bit, and I would maybe sound contentious, but I don't think this is a fight between men and women at all. I think this is something that men and women together have to fight for a better and more equitable society. So let's not make it man versus woman. We need many, many more men who believe in gender equity. And sometimes we also have women who are repositories of patriarchal values. So it doesn't start and end with the anatomy, but goes far beyond as a change in the society and in the thinking and in the mindset. There are far more gender sensitive men, I know, than some gen women themselves. So we need all of you to be there, fellow collaborators and partners and colleagues, to make this happen.
We've spoken about, that's very well said. Don't be shy now. Come on, guys. You can give a better applause to that one. Yeah. Rekha, we were talking about what about monetary policy? The way you're working from budget, that'll be next, which will have a gender lens.
Absolutely, because monetary policy, you know, we don't have any women on board like the governor, and also the policy has not looked into through a gender lens. So that's my aspiration, like who will be, whether Dr. Shaktikant Das or who will be that champion on the monetary policy front who addresses this gender lens. Yeah.
On pay gap, I will say, women, start on your own. खुदी को कर बुलंद इतना कि हर तकदीर से पहले खुदा बंदी से ये पूछे बता तेरी रजा क्या है.
On that lovely note, our time's up. Thank you all, lovely women and men in this room, for this very engaging conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you all. Please request to stay back for a group photograph. Thank you, Sonal, and all the panelists. Definitely India awaits its first female Chief Justice of India in 2027. Moving on to the next session. GST is the biggest reform of the government. It has reshaped India's tax landscape. Has the time come to unleash the next phase of GST reforms? 6 years down the line, is GST still a reform half done? Let's find out in the next panel discussion. And to moderate this session, I would like to invite Gaurav Chaudhary back on stage. Joining him for the panel, may I please invite Ms. Rama Matthew, former member, Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs, Mr. Prateek Jain, partner, Price Waterhouse, and Mr. V. Lakshmi Kumaran, founder and managing partner of Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rama Matthew, Prateek Jain, and Lakshmi Kumaran. We meet at a time when we are just about 6 months away before we complete the 7th anniversary of what was billed as independent India's biggest tax reform, if not the biggest reform, which is goods and services tax. It took a long time coming. It took probably more than a decade before actually in a grand midnight event on June 30, in the intervening night of June 30 and July 1, and in a grand midnight event in Parliament, we saw GST roll out. 6.5 is almost 7 years from now. Rama Matthew, do you think it's still a work in progress, or we are nearing perfection very soon?
Let me put it like this. There are two ways of looking at this. One is the glass half full, the other is the glass half empty. What we need to address is actually what was the objective of GST reform. And if you look at the big picture objective, that is integration of taxes, simplification of the logistics process, simplification of the implementation process, I think we have pretty much hit it. And now what we are looking at is what we really need to do next. And there we need to address the micro details, which will make our life easier. There we have challenges. We do know that we have certain challenges. We do know that we need to address certain very specific issues. And there, when we need to address those issues, primarily in the tax rate structure, because the initial transposition was of the service tax and the central excise rates into the GST format for easier compliance, frankly. And now we need to look at it from the big picture to make sure that the contradictions which have crept in, the gaps which have crept in, are addressed. Some of the processes we need to address.
Absolutely. Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran, we are nearing the 7th anniversary of GST. It promised so much. Do you think it's glass half full, or do you think it's half empty, or probably more than empty?
I think, first of all, I must say that heralding GST in this country is another great event. I never thought in my life that the tax paid in Maharashtra will be given as a credit in Karnataka. I never imagined. It has happened. It needs celebration, no doubt at all. It has been a great effort, and the cooperative federalism is in full swing. While we all applaud the advent of the GST, we must also realize that the law that have been written, where the audience is the people here and many people outside, they can't understand this English. Right. And we need to put in a mechanism where a small and medium company wanting to be tax compliant, and how will he understand what he is supposed to do? Should he always run to Pratik, if not to me, or to anybody, to understand what this language is? You need to do something. And other countries also have this problem. The legal language always clouds in a manner. It's difficult to understand for common man, though it is in English. We need to necessarily simplify, and the CBIC and the governments should come out with simple understanding and a lot of FAQs, which they did in the beginning. Right. But only thing is, they don't want to own it up.
That's
when
right.
somebody wants to rely on it, they say, no, interpretation is separated, etc. It goes to them. That's where the problem is. But what we need is, as Rama has mentioned, that we need to now look whether the real estate should still be outside GST or not. Right. It's an important question, because if you bring it in here, what are the other implications which can come benefit to the economy? Right. That's one of the questions. I think I will answer a little later. Let us hear Pratik what he wants to say.
Right, Pratik. So is it still a work in progress? I mean, how satisfied are you, if you look back over the last 6.5 years, do you look back at it with a degree of satisfaction that it has promised a fair degree, it has fulfilled a fair degree of what it's promised? And also, on Lakshmi Kumaran's point, is it a communication problem too? Because I remember when GST first came out, and probably in a mistaken zeal to make it more understandable and comprehensible to the Hindi-speaking audience, the government said, "Isko bastu evang seva kar boliye," and nobody understood that. In fact, traders said that GST is far more easier to understand. What's your view?
Definitely, I think it is work in progress. There's no doubt about that. But a reform of this nature and scale is supposed to be work in progress for many, many years. I mean, if you look at Europe, they implemented GST maybe 3-4 decades back, but still work in progress, right? So what any tax reform of this nature, you have to see it from 3 perspectives to my mind: simplicity, certainty, and transparency. GST has brought in a lot of structural simplicity, right? Same law across the state, pricing is easy, supply chain is easier, movement of goods is easy, customer can see the invoice, entire GST is there on the invoice. GST Council takes all the decisions, agenda items are there, people know how the decisions have been taken. It's not that any state can get up and say, I will increase the tax rate from 5% to 12%, right? Earlier, when we used to buy a mobile phone, we always used to see which state has a lower VAT rate, and so on. So therefore, structural simplicity is there, transparency is there. I think the element of certainty is perhaps missing. I would think that we need to look at 3 different buckets of reforms: structural reforms, legislative reforms, and most importantly, as Ms. Lakshmi was saying, administrative reforms. Because the tax administration perhaps has not been given that much of importance as the compliance part of it. Still, you see center and state fighting with each other, different interpretations, advanced ruling not working, and so on. So we'll have to work towards it. But overall, if I look back 6.5 years, I think it's just as good as it could have been, maybe better than what perhaps we expected at the beginning.
Absolutely. Rama Matthew, Pratik raised a very relevant point on transparency and structural simplicity. But one of the biggest pain points of GST so far has been multiplicity of tax slabs and also the unpredictability. So GST was built to be something like a good and simple tax, but we have multiple tax slabs, and clearly it goes against the definitional idea of a single tax or at most a 2 tax slab regime. On the top of it, we have unpredictability and interpretation by tax authorities. Say, for instance, the pizza topping is a clear case. Last year, about 1.5 years ago, it was ruled that pizza toppings will attract a different GST. Pizzas had inside a pizza store would attract a different GST, and pizzas delivered at home or somewhere else would attract a different GST. It goes against the definitional idea of simplicity, doesn't it?
But you forgot to mention Malabar Paratha.
That's right, yes.
I was waiting for that and for your extruded products, namkeens. Well, one of the challenges we have had, as I said, is on multiplicity of slabs and what I would call rate rationalization. There was the GST Council had already recognized it and set up a rate rationalization committee. Unfortunately, the rate rationalized committee has actually not yet submitted its report. That is a massive exercise. The second problem we will actually find is also that because of lack of legal interpretation, statutory interpretation by the courts, because of the lack of the GST Council's functioning, a lot of interpretational issues are now coming back to the GST Council for policy decision, which should not actually happen. It should not, and the courts cannot be, the high courts and the jurisdiction cannot be the first court of appeal, which they are very clear about, that they are not the first court of appeal. They will provide temporary relief until such time as a GST tribunal starts working and provides interpretational clarity. Once these two things happen, a lot of these the problems which are being flagged right now can get addressed. Very honestly, I agree with Pratik. I did not expect personally, and I was a departmental officer till just a month ago. I did not expect it to stabilize so quickly. Right. I expected it to be a lot more challenging. The first 2 years were challenging. Something which Pratik said, that about certainty. There are two ways of looking at it. One of the reasons we don't have certainty is because every time somebody flags a problem, the GST Council clarifies one way or the other. You do have a clarification, you do have a notification. That makes for a very responsive government, but it also makes for a very, very, shall we say, challenging implementation universe.
Absolutely. Now, Pratik, Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran, touched upon this in his initial remarks when he said that initially the GST Council and the GST Secretariat used to put out very frequent FAQs to clarify matters that probably seem to have stopped. Do you think that there is a lack of communication that has crept into the administrative aspect of GST, particularly on how policy decisions are being communicated for better clarity?
Look, I don't think that the communication has slowed down or things like that. I think the focus of the government has moved to a lot towards collections. Initially, the government had created different groups to say for different sectors we will have committee of officers who will issue clarification and so on. Now that has taken a backseat. GST Council is meeting little less frequently now. As it was meeting earlier, and there are a lot of work to be done. What we have been requesting the government is that please set up sectoral committees, so to say, because the issues for e-commerce and let's say online gaming, which is getting a lot of sort of coverage these days, is completely different from the issues, let's say, of a power sector or a real estate. So the same officer, and if you see what happens in other developed economies, your tax officers also have a sectoral expertise. So that's where we need to get to. It's a process between all the stakeholders. It should continue. I don't think there's a lack of communication, but a lot more focus needs to be there on this now.
Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran, Pratik touched upon the issue of online gaming, and July 11 last year probably is a significant day for the online gaming industry because they were expecting something and something else turned out from the GST Council meeting where 28% tax was being imposed on full gaming value of online games. There were all kinds of reactions that is triggered, that it's going to kill the industry. 6 months down the line, how do you think the industry has actually adjusted to it?
Thank you. I think I must make a statement that I do represent almost a number of gaming companies in the Supreme Court and others. So therefore, what I make a statement, I must make it very clear that a disclaimer here. I would say that the gaming companies are not very much worried whether the rate of tax is 28 or 18 or something, etc. That I think they can live with it. The main problem is regarding the valuation. And pardon my say, I think with due respect to the powers that be, including the senior government councils in the Supreme Court, the way the evaluation is done for the past period, where the demands have been raised in astronomical numbers, is, according to me, is incorrect. Of course, the courts ultimately will decide. But the dispute ought not have reached there. People should sit down and then talk and exactly what they have done now.
Right.
The same thing should have been done in the past.
Absolutely.
That's what I would say. One more question you mentioned about the multiple rates of taxes on the GST, which is creating its own problems. But I must say one thing, sir. If you look at the Indian economy, income tax can be charged at different slabs depending upon the income of the people. We can find out what the rate of income, and accordingly we can charge. But GST being indirect taxes, it falls on everybody at the same level.
Absolutely.
Therefore, any country cannot afford to have, especially a country like India, cannot afford to have the same rate of tax for rice and wheat and also motor cars and refrigerators. It just cannot happen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, sir, for giving this insight, and the Honorable Minister is here. We'd like to wrap up this discussion, hoping that very soon we'll move into a simple two-tier GST structure. Thank you so much, Rama Matthew, Pratik Jain, and V. Lakshmi Kumar.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please stay back for a group photograph, please. Thank you, Gaurav, and all the panelists. That was a very insightful discussion. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the most awaited session of the evening. Someone who needs no introduction. The minister who has completely transformed India's power and renewable energy space from the time he took charge of the ministry in 2017. Betting big on the reforms in the power sector, he has focused on adopting advanced technologies and brought changes in the operational procedures of the regulatory authorities. In order to secure our energy future under his able leadership, India is constructing a significant 132 gigawatt of electricity capacity with a projection to add 517 gigawatt by 2031-32. In the renewable energy space, India has already added a total of 72 gigawatts solar power capacity so far, because the transition to clean energy is about making an investment in our future. Please welcome none other than the Minister of Power and Renewable Energy, Mr. R.K. Singh, for his address.
Friends, ladies and gentlemen, what I will cover for you is what we have done, what more needs to be done, how I look at the future, how I feel we as a country need to prepare for the future. And the challenges that face us, the opportunities before us, and how I propose to actually take advantage of the opportunities and prepare for the future. Now, if you ask me as to what is the one distinctive feature which separates a developing country from a developed country, I'll tell you that the one major distinguishing feature is this, that in a developed country you don't have load shedding. The power does not go up. No country can develop, no country can industrialize if it does not have sufficient power, because it's electricity which powers the industry, it's electricity which powers everything. No development is possible without electricity. All infrastructure is necessary, all infrastructure is important, but I believe, and I don't think it's a biased view, I believe that electricity, power, is the most important infrastructure, which is a sine qua non for development. Now, when our government came to office, you had a power shortage which ranged from 10% to 4.5%. In about 12-13, the shortage was in the region of 10, 11, 12%, came down to about 4.5% in 2014. Today, the shortage has been wiped out. 0.1% to 0.2%, something like that. We have also emerged as a country which is at the forefront of energy transition. Simultaneously, we've done both. We've also emerged as a country which has ensured universal access. And ensuring universal access was a huge, huge task. You had to connect 29 million homes. We connected 29 million homes. And we connected 29 million homes in 19 months in what the International Energy Agency called the largest and the fastest expansion of access ever in the history of the power sector. Now, what happened was that we added about 194,000 megawatts of power generation capacity, out of which about 107,000 megawatts is renewable. That's what happened. What happened was that we constructed transmission lines, 193,000 circuit kilometers of transmission lines. And all this is in the past 7-8 years. Transmission lines, which connected the whole country into one grid running on one frequency, making this the largest single integrated grid in the world. We increased the transfer capacity from 36,000 megawatts to 117,000 megawatts today. I mean, that I think is about 4 times, 5 times. That's what we did. What we did was that we added 3,000 substations. We upgraded 4,000 substations. We added almost about 5.5 lakh circuit kilometers of LT lines, 2.5 lakh circuit kilometers of HT lines, about 7.5 lakh transformers, and sundry other equipment. That's what we did. So as a result of all this, because we added the generation capacity, because we increased the transmission capacity, and because we strengthened the distribution systems, we were able to bring up the availability of power in rural areas from over 12.5 hours in 12.5 hours in 2015 to about 21 hours to 22 hours today. Last year it was 22 hours. Now it has dipped a bit. It's gone down to 21 hours. That's the average, the national average in rural areas. In urban areas, it's 23.8 hours. The generator is fast disappearing. You don't see generators anymore. The days of the generator are gone. We have made 24/7 into a right. We have promulgated rules which says that no distribution company can do gratuitous load shedding. That means load shedding without any technical fault or whatever, just for want of electricity. If you do that, you have to pay compensation to your consumers. And and we've also put in place mechanisms for oversight. So we have a couple of inquiries going on, and any DISCOM which does gratuitous load shedding, that will get penalized. The consumers will get a compensation. What we also ensured was that at the same time, we emerged as a leader in energy transition. Our rate of capacity addition of renewable energy capacity has been one of the fastest in the world in the past 5-6 years. I think leave out China. I don't think no other country would match us in the rate of capacity addition. Today, I have 180,000 megawatts of renewable energy capacity. We had pledged that by 2030 we'll have 40% of our capacity coming from non-fossils. Today, our non-fossil capacity is 4%. That means we are way beyond the target, and it's still 7 years to go. So we have upped our ambition by 2030. We'll have 50% of our capacity coming from non-fossils. Actually, this is what we have pledged. Actually, we shall have 65% of our capacity coming from non-fossils. Now, because of the fact that we called money control, I'll tell you the monetary side of it. The total investments which we have made is about 17 lakh crores. And the capacities under construction are a further 17.5 lakh crores. That's the investments which we have brought in, and the investments which are going on. We are adding about, this is the capacity which I already constructed. We are adding about 99,000 megawatts of renewable energy capacity. That's under construction. We have under construction about 27,000 megawatts of thermal capacity. 12,000, in addition, we have bid out 12,000 megawatts more of thermal capacity. I have a further 21,000 megawatts of thermal capacity under survey and investigation, and a further about 22,000 megawatts under initial stages. We have identified the land, etc. So 80,000 megawatts, actually 87,000 megawatts of thermal capacity we are adding. 99,000 megawatts is under construction. I have another 30 of that's non-fossil, and I have another about 32,000 megawatts under bid. That's renewable energy. And renewable energy, we shall be bidding out almost 40,000-50,000 megawatts every year. That's the rate of growth which we plan, which we are doing. By hydro capacity, when I joined, the hydro capacity was in doldrums. The hydro sector was in doldrums. It was moribund, as you would call it, in coma, as you call it. I mean, no growth. We started it. We restarted it. And now I have 46,900 or 47,000 megawatts installed, and another 18,000 megawatts of hydro under construction, and 13,000 megawatts under various survey and investigation. This 46,000 megawatts I'm going to double. And so I'll make it about 92,000, 100,000 megawatts of hydro capacity. Everything I'm going to double, triple. Each of my companies is actually doubling in size or tripling in size. That's what we have done. I mean, we've transformed the power sector. And that was necessary. It was very necessary, because if we had not done that, we would have been like Sri Lanka. We have not only transformed it, we have made it, we have not only increased the size, we have made it viable. The AT&C losses have been brought down by 12%, from 27% to 15.41%. And that I'm not happy with. I want to bring it down to 10-12%. We had a meeting of all the states today, and we'll continue the meeting tomorrow. And this is what I have said, that these AT&C losses will have to come down further to about 12%, 10%. Nobody could have imagined that to be possible. Nobody thought that this could be done. Why? Because we are a democracy. Why? Because we are a federal system, and because electricity is in the concurrent list. Now, despite all that, we've done it. The fact that the people didn't understand what the concurrent list meant. Now, concurrent list doesn't mean that the state and the center have equal powers. State has predominant powers. If I make a law, that prevails. If the state government wants to make a law, they can do so. But if on any point their law conflicts with my law, with the central government's law, to that extent that state law is invalid. If we make a rule, that applies throughout the country. So we are making rules, and we are making sure that people follow them. And I have made it very clear that anybody who violates the rules, whether it pertains to availability or whether it pertains to fair tariffs, etc., they will be prosecuted. And I don't have any hesitation. I mean, that everybody understands that I don't have any hesitation in taking action where action is warranted. So things are happening. Now, why this was necessary, why this was timely, is that just one figure will tell you this. In 2014, the peak demand was in the region of about 131,000 megawatts. Today, the peak demand is in the region of 243,000 megawatts. Now, that's the increase in demand which has happened. It's gone up by 80%. Now, imagine if we had not added the capacity. Imagine that. In between, I also felt that probably I'm adding too much. But, we had exports. We are exporting to Bangladesh, Nepal, etc. But, I mean, whatever capacity I added has been lapped up, and now I am having to add more capacity at a rapid pace. Now, this is great news, because this means that our economy is growing rapidly. One reason why, of course, the demand increased was because we connected 29 million homes. And, I go around in my constituency, I contest elections. I won twice. The second time with enhanced margin. The third time I'll win with with higher margin. I'll tell you that. But I see that even in poor homes, now you see television sets. Now you see refrigerators. When I first started going around my constituency, I was offered tea. And you know, if you have a constituency, you can't refuse any offer of tea or sweets or whatever, wherever. So now I also am offered cold drinks. I also see air conditioners at home, in the villages. Mind you, in the villages. In towns one could see that. And in the villages of Bihar now you see air conditioners. So that's one of the reasons why the demand is galloping. And the demand is galloping. As I said, 80% increase, 130 gigawatts to 243 gigawatts. And by 2030, my officers tell me that the demand will be 366,000 megawatts. Now that I believe is an underestimate. I think that the demand is likely to go to 400,000 megawatts. We are the fastest growing large economy, and if any thermometer were to be an indicator of this electricity is the thermometer. If the power demand is growing at that speed, that means your country is growing, and our country is growing. And will continue to grow at this rate for the next 3 decades. So imagine the huge burden which is there on me to make sure that I add enough capacity to meet that demand, and that we shall add that capacity. And you know, the huge, as I said, adding about 193,000 circuit kilometers, and I'm having to add capacity, transmission capacity. You know, every month I approve thousands of new circuit kilometers of transmission capacity because I am running out of connectivity. We had said that we'll have 500,000 megawatts of renewables by 2030. I think we'll cross that because, you know, for 1 million tons of hydrogen, you need 25,000 megawatts of renewable energy. And I already have 7 million tons of green hydrogen manufacturing lined up. Incidentally, we are emerging as one of the biggest manufacturers of green hydrogen and green ammonia in the world. And we are the most competitive because my cost of making renewable energy is the cheapest in the world. You know, 1 megawatt of renewable energy for me, solar energy, is $600,000. That's cheaper than anywhere else. So nobody can compete with me. Despite the fact that, you know, developed countries are adopting, you know, protectionist measures, which they used to rail against. Despite that, I am still competitive. You know, one country is giving a subsidy of $3 per kilogram of green hydrogen, $3. Now, that's the price of making a kilogram of green hydrogen. That's what they are giving as subsidy. They are giving us a huge subsidy on the entire sort of, you know, value chain of renewables. But still, we shall be competitive. And not only that we are adding capacity, we are sort of, as I said, transforming large quantities of renewables, green corridors, the quantum of storage which we are adding again, I think is something which is going to lead to sort of wide eyes because now more and more bids are around the clock renewable energy, more and more bids are for dispatchable renewable energy, which requires solar wind hybrid with storage. I have about 35,000 megawatts of pumped storage lined up under various clearances, etc. About 3,000 already constructed, about 4,000 under construction. Battery storage. Very expensive. Why? Because the West, you know, they kept talking about how necessary it was to fight global warming and how everybody needs to take steps. They actually took no steps and therefore did not construct storage capacity. Whatever storage capacity is there, you know, about 90% or 95% is in China. The West, no storage capacity under construction. So we are constructing storage capacity, battery storage. Very expensive. Right now it's 10 rupees per kilowatt hour. For making 1 unit of solar, 2 rupees 50 paise. For storing it for 1 hour, 10 rupees. That's the price. So unless until you have volumes, the price won't come down. But I'm bringing down the volumes. We are leading the change. We are the lowest emitters in the world. Our per capita emissions are 1/3 of the global average. And yet, we are the only country which has met both its indices. And before time, we had pledged that we'll reduce our emissions intensity by 33%. By 2030, we achieved that in 2019. We have some programs of energy efficiency which are world leaders. Our Perform, Achieve, Trade program for industry is a world leading program. where we set targets for specific energy consumption and specific emissions for industries. And if any industry overachieves that, they get energy saving certificates. Now that will be translated into carbon credits. And if they underachieve, they either buy energy saving certificates or they pay a penalty. That has resulted in a reduction of CO2 emissions, mind you, on a per annum basis of about 107 million tons per annum. Just one program. Our LED program has resulted in an emissions reduction of 113 million tons of CO2 per annum. That's the quantum of CO2 emissions reduced by another program. Our star rating of appliances in the 5-star, 4-star, that's our program. 5-star ACs and all that. That's our program. And resulted in reduction of CO2 emissions of 57 million tons per annum. We have a program of energy efficiency for construction. The Eco-Nivas Sanhita for residential buildings and ECBC for commercial buildings. So the entire gamut of emissions reduction we've carried out, achieved our target, 11 years in advance for emissions reduction, achieved our target of renewable energy capacity addition 9 years in advance. We'll achieve the next NDC also well in advance. So that's what we are. We are growing rapidly. We are different. And the rules and regulations, the lady announced me, they mentioned the rules and regulations. We've changed it. We've made it totally business friendly, eco-friendly. I mean, for example, you take transmission. I've introduced the general network access. Now, this is not there even in the United States or anywhere else. Here, you apply for connectivity, you will get it. Allotment will happen straight away, and initially you would have got it within about 30 days. Now, because of so much of capacity coming, so therefore it will take you maybe 3 months, 4 months, but you will get it. And you get connected at one point. You are connected to the whole country. And connect to the nearest ISTS node, maybe 20 kilometers away or something, and you get connected to the whole country. Today you sell to Guwahati. Tomorrow you buy from Mumbai, day after tomorrow you sell to Baroda or whatever. You can generate anywhere, sell anywhere. We have provided enough transmission capacity. I mean, buy anywhere, sell anywhere, generate anywhere, it's one country. That's what we have done. No other country has this, this general network access. And that connectivity part also I have delicensed. You don't need a transmission license to get connected to the general to the ISTS. You just get, if it's within 20-25 kilometers, just get connected. You don't need a license. I mean, everything we've made easy. Green open access. We have promulgated rules which say that you can set up capacity anywhere in the country, and we'll give you free transmission to wherever your factory is. Just set it up. Open access. Open access rules I have brought out, which guarantees that you will get open access within 15 days. That means it is not incumbent upon you to buy electricity only from your distribution company. No, you can buy it from anybody you want throughout the country. We have come out with bids for offshore wind. We have transformed the sector. We are different. We are, and all this capacity I haven't had to put in money. All this huge capacity. I get investments. One bid, and you have 7-10 companies competing. That's where we are at. Every major fund is invested here. And, we'll continue to be one of the fastest growing capacities in the world. Why? Because, we are huge and we are growing. And no other country is growing as rapidly as us. That's the opportunity before us. We will double, we'll triple. As I said, I think my demand is going to double by about 2030, and will triple again next 7 years after that. No other huge country is going to double or triple. Other large economies are growing at 2%, 2.5%. I am growing at 7.5%, and I'll continue growing at 7.5%. And in the case of power, I grew at 9% last year. This year, I'm growing at 10%. In three months, I grew at 20%. On a daily basis, my demand is 8,000 to 10,000 megawatts more than the previous year, the same day. And this is the rate at which I'll continue growing. So there's no other market as big as us, and there's no other market is growing as fast as us, and there's no other market which has so much ease of doing business as we've provided. So we are different. We are sort of going places. Be with us, you will grow. All my companies have grown 3 times, 4 times. I mean, one of my companies, NTPC, has tripled in value. Its share prices have gone up 3 times. Another company of mine, I mean, the share prices have gone up 2.5 times. PGCIL, Power Grid, etc. REC has gone up about 3.5, 4 times. That's the share prices. PFC, the share prices have gone up 4 times, 5 times. If you haven't invested, you missed out. Huh? But there you are. So that's money control. So I'll be there. Ask anything you want. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that address. I would like to invite Money Control's managing items, Nalin Mehta, for a fireside chat with the minister.
Thanks very much. Sir, thanks very much for that very detailed and thoughtful exposition on India's power sector. Everything you talk about is in multiples of 2, 3 more earlier than targets. So a lot of what we hear, I mean, you've done 24, well, almost 100% connectivity, right, on power, 100%. Yes, so we hear a lot about the target of uninterrupted power supply over the next couple of years, after the elections and so on.
It's here, it's now.
Right.
Because the rules have already been promulgated. That's again something which I sort of hammered down in the meeting today with all the states. Any load shedding, you get penalized. It's there because the capacity is there, the ability to transfer electricity is there from any corner to any corner. We have strengthened the distribution systems. There is no reason why any DISCOM should do load shedding. So if they do load shedding, they have to explain why. They have to give, they have to compensate the consumers. Now, all that I'm asking is for the consumers to stand up and complain. Incidentally, we have set up computer grievance redressal mechanisms in every division and every circle. So file a complaint.
So the question I think is at the level of challenge at the consumer level. When just before you came in a little earlier in the evening, we had Mr. Jayant Sinha, Chairman of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance, and he was doing an address from Hazaribagh from his constituency. And there was an issue there a little bit. So that's just a small example, but at the ground level, how do you get over those kind of challenges coming forward?
Earlier, there was this feeling that now you have the state governments. There was this misconception. So the power is in the concurrent list. So people felt that concurrent list means that the state government has total control over distribution and the central government only looks after generation. Nonsense. The entire sector is in the concurrent list. That means the center has as much authority over distribution as the state has over generation. It's across the board. So we made rules. We made rules, and those rules are made under law. They are subordinate legislation. They have been laid before the parliament. So they are subordinate legislation. Any violation of the rule is a violation of the law, and that entails penalties. And I have already told everybody that we shall prosecute you if you are in violation of the rules. And we have made rules which provide for this, that there shall be no load shedding. Now, why this load shedding happens now here and there, would be happening, and I'm getting this investigated, is that some states have run out, some distribution companies may have run out of money for buying power. Now, I have made a system, Basically, I'm saying 2 or 3 things. I have been saying 2 or 3 things. One is that if you are a state chief minister, or if you are a state power minister, whatever, and you want to give subsidy, go right ahead. Give everybody subsidy, give free electricity to everybody. I have no problems at all. But you don't want the consumer to pay, you have to pay. So that subsidy amount has to be paid up front. We have made rules. And if you don't pay the subsidy up front, it does not get passed through. Second, you buy electricity from the generator, you have to pay. If you don't pay, your connectivity to the exchange gets cut off in the first leg. You delay further by 30 days further. Number one, you delay by 30 days. The time for payment is 45 days. You don't pay in 75 days, your connectivity to the exchange gets automatically cut off. Nobody can interfere. It's built into the system now. You delay for further 30 days, your short-term access goes, total. And your medium-term access goes. And your further 30 days, your long-term access gets cut by 10% every month. So you can't get electricity from anywhere. Now, this has proved effective, so effective that the outstanding dues of Gencos used to be 1,35,000 crores in 2021 or so. That's been brought down by to about 52,000 crores. And every month they pay installments to wipe that out. And current dues are paid every month. There is no outstanding dues payment. Now, what would be happening somewhere is that some DISCOM may still be not viable enough, not having enough money to pay for the power. Though we have reduced, as I said, I have increased the viability. The losses have come down from 27 to 15%. And I have made rules to make sure that the losses come down. Now, some DISCOM may still be lagging behind. Now, those DISCOMs, they have to be supported by the state government. Otherwise, they'll have to pay a penalty. If that happens.
Right. So, if we are getting into election season, if the government comes back to power and we have a Modi 3.0, well, in a Modi 3.0 government after the election, what would be, in your view, the 3 important priorities for the Power Ministry?
One is capacity. The second is capacity. The third is bring down the losses from 15% to about 12%, 10%. So the top right. As far as energy transition is concerned, I'm already a world leader. Now, earlier, you see all these guys from the developed countries would come, and they would start off by saying how necessary it is to carry out, energy transition away from fossils, etc. Now they don't. Now they don't, because I'm doing better than them in energy transition. Now I talk to them, they don't talk to me. So as far as transition is concerned, I'm well off. So capacity, 1. Capacity, 2, because in spite of the fact that I have added almost, the total capacity of what used existed, I'm near doubling it. Despite that, I still have to add more capacity.
One of the things that you spearheaded yourself and what the ministry has done very successfully is to put in place a system for timely payments from DISCOMs to the generation companies and so on. Now, while that is on track, there is a issue of legacy debt for the DISCOMs. So how do you handle that?
That's what I brought down, no? The legacy dues. The current dues are all up to date. We are the only country probably in the world where the current payments for electricity drawn from Gencos is totally up to date. Legacy dues was 1,35,000 crores. Now, what I have done is that the rule which we made, we said that is given any payment which you make will first go against the legacy dues. So now, how do you manage it? So I said, fine. Now, legacy dues I'm making into installments. So I made it into installments. So I said that every month you have to first pay that installment of legacy dues. And then you have to pay the current bill. You have to do both. You can't pay the current bill without paying the legacy dues installment. So that is being paid. The current bills are being paid. And
so, if I may,
1,35,000 to 50.
If I may push you, any major announcements in your sector we can expect in the interim budget?
In the interim budget, I have a number of asks. So I have placed that before the Ministry of Finance. Let us see.
And what are your asks?
No, my asks are what? I mean, basically, I want more sort of green finance. I want incentives for, green hydrogen, etc. So these are between me and my finance. Yeah.
Fair enough. There is a projection that this year the peak demand could be hitting about 256 GW. Are we prepared for that?
Yes, I hope so. I hope so. I have adding capacity. You see, I have a lot of, as I said, 27,000 megawatts under construction. I'm trying to get that. That is thermal. I'm trying to get that through as fast as possible. I have 99,000 megawatts of renewable under construction. So I'm trying to get that through as fast as possible. So these are under construction. So these are in the pipeline. So I am now thinking of the next year, the year after that. So I'm starting new capacities very quickly, both renewable and thermal and hydro. So as I said, looking ahead, I see that as the major challenge before me. The fact is that if there is not enough power, our country will not grow at 7.5%. So it is incumbent upon us to make sure that we have that power. Because without electricity, no industry is going to come. That is very clear about. So we have all that capacity under construction. Adding, my installed capacity today is 426,000 megawatts. So the peak demand of 254,000 megawatts should not be an issue. But in thermal, what happens is that typically on any given day, I would have about 12, 13 to 15,000 megawatts which are not on bar because of some niggle here or there. So one has to have that much of reserve. The problem is not so much during the solar hours because I have added that much of renewable energy capacity. I am running neck to neck insofar as the non-solar hours are concerned, where thermal is the requirement. Now, initially, there was this feeling that, let's not add too much of thermal because we have to transition anyway. But the point is that storage is expensive. I came out with bids for storage, very expensive. I can't afford to bill my people at 12 rupees 50 paise for electricity. But 10 rupees a unit for storing electricity for 1 hour, renewable energy. So I still have to rely on thermal until and unless the storage cost comes down. So I have to add thermal. So I'm adding thermal. And I don't make any apologies for it, plain and simple. Why? Because my per capita emissions are still the world's lowest. So I do not make any apology. I'm brazen about it. If needed be, instead of 87,000, I'll add 120,000 megawatts of thermal. But there's not going to be any shortage of electricity because without that we can't grow.
Mr. Singh, you spoke very forcefully about India being on track for the renewable energy targets for 2030 and ahead of the targets. This is something the Prime Minister has personally led from the front as well, and so on. I know he's also talked in the past of 100% over by 2070 and so on. How much, while we are ahead of the targets, as you said, how much investment is needed? And where do you see that coming from in the coming period to achieve the remaining targets?
No, we are getting investment. We are, Bloomberg rated us as the most attractive destination for investments in renewables in the world. So I'm getting investments. I have no problems on that. What I need to do is I need to get more and more storage capacity. So we had one PLI for manufacturing of battery storage. Unfortunately, that first PLI, it has focused entirely almost on mobility, for which you need a different type of storage. That type of storage is something which requires fast charging and fast discharge, etc. The storage which we need for grid scale, storing thousands of megawatts for 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, is different. So we are coming out with another bid for another PLI for storage, which will be for grid scale storage. Now, once that manufacturing happens, then the price of storage will come down. So from 10 rupees, it has already come down globally, I believe, to about 7.5 rupees, 6 rupees. But we wanted to bring down to come down further. Pump storage is cheaper. Pump storage, I am adding. We've carried out a survey of all the possible sites, and we are trying to operationalize it as soon as possible. That will cost me about 3 rupees 50 paise, 4 rupees per kilowatt hour. So once this gets on track, then I may not really have to push so much for thermal. But till this gets on track, that is necessary. Because you need round-the-clock electricity.
Right. So on the question of green hydrogen...
But investments I'm getting. Even for storage, PLI, I'm getting investments. For manufacturing of solar cells and modules right from polysilicon upwards, I'm getting investments. So we are not having to put in any money. I mean, our business world is now big enough.
So you mentioned manufacturing. If I may ask you a little bit more about that, there was a push to indigenize manufacturing in this. So what's the response been on that, and the kind of where do you think we are on that? Because a lot of the equipment was Chinese manufactured earlier.
Yes. So it's like this. The capacity. The first what we did was we put customs barriers. The customs barriers were huge, hefty. So 40% on modules, they are still there, and 25% on cells. Now, then we also came out with non-tariff barriers, because what happened was that despite these customs barriers, you had manufacturing from, let's say, China being offshored to countries with which we had an FTA. Basically, you stamp it with a country where we have an FTA, so you escape the customs barrier. So we brought in something called a non-tariff barrier, approved list of models and manufacturers. So that's worked. The net result of all this has been that the capacity of module manufacturing has gone up from about 20,000 megawatts to about 50,000 megawatts now. But it's still going up further. By 2030, much of the capacity is under construction. So I'll have by 2030 about 24,000 megawatts of manufacturing capacity from polysilicon to modules, the entire value chain. And I have said that I'm not going to accept anything below 19% efficiency. So that is another thing which I'm looking at. And this 19% efficiency, this lower threshold will keep getting up. So maybe after a year or 2 years, I'll make it 21% of, as the threshold, lower threshold, and so on. So I already have 50,000 megawatts manufacturing capacity of modules. Cells, polysilicon to module 24,000 megawatts by 2030 will be there. It's under construction. I'll have the entire value chain of about 50,000 polysilicon to modules and 50,000 cell modules by about 2030. So about 100,000 megawatts. So we are already exporting now, United States, etc. That volume of exports is going to grow, and of course my domestic demand will be.
Right.
Wind, I am already a leader. About we export wind equipment already. Some larger capacity of wind turbines have to be made here. So I have told my manufacturers that there is going to come a time when I am going to say that I will not accept any turbine less than, let's say, 5 megawatts or whatever. But about 80-90% of the manufacturing is already here. We export from here. Hydrogen, I am going to be a leader, as I said. HVDC, transmission lines. Now that is one field where I want entrepreneurs to get in. So some of the manufacturers are getting in. Because we are adding this much of thermal capacity, so in between what had happened was that the world thought that we are moving away from thermals. So the manufacturing capacity of thermal equipment, boilers, steam turbines, etc., have come down. We only have 2 manufacturers now left. So that again has to increase.
So on the question of green hydrogen, you mentioned hydrogen a little bit. This is something the Prime Minister has talked about at the Independence Day earlier. You've announced a whole bunch of incentives, 17,000 plus crores up to 2030. What's the response been to that since the incentives were announced on the demand side?
Great. So as I said, we came out with a bid for PLI for making green hydrogen. It was oversubscribed, that bid. So that is good. We've also come out with a bid for manufacturing of electrolyzers. So because the world capacity of making electrolyzers is also limited, so that response has also been very good. So I'm getting investments. And making of green hydrogen, apart from the PLI, people are setting up capacities by themselves also. So the capacities are being set up. The total capacities which are under planning, different stages of planning, is 7.8 million tons, which is pretty good, one of the largest in the world. So barriers set up by some countries is a worry. One country, I will not name the countries. One country, as I said, $3 of subsidy per kilogram green hydrogen. Some countries, the European countries, came out with other non-tariff barriers, saying that the generation of renewable energy and The electrolyzer, the distance between that should not be more than 500 kilometers, etc. These are non-tariff barriers. So we said that you must remove these because you keep telling us, you have been lecturing us, the developing world, about the values of free trade. So now why this protection is there. Now they've also got into agreements with other countries for importing green hydrogen, like countries like South American countries, etc. So I questioned, I said, what is this? You buy green hydrogen on basis of open bid. Everybody will compete. So those barriers will break down. We shall emerge as the biggest exporter in the world. I don't have any doubt about that. Because you can talk about making green hydrogen in Peru or wherever, or Africa or Morocco. You will have the sun, no doubt, but you don't have the transmission, you don't have the ecosystem. They can't make green hydrogen cheaper than I can. So ultimately, I think the price will prevail. There's another thing. All these developed countries, apart from needing green hydrogen, also need carbon credits because they don't want to sacrifice their standards of living, which necessitates large quantum of energy spent on heating, etc. They want carbon credits. And so for green hydrogen, we will be giving carbon credits. Those who buy green hydrogen from here will get a part of the carbon credits. So we are getting into agreements like this. They want that. So ultimately, we shall be an major exporter.
Right. So my last question to you. India is in the unique position where while we are championing clean energy in the way that you outlined, we are also one of probably the only country in the world barring China which is also adding coal capacity in terms of coal generation plant and so on.
Now, other countries have also added.
So while, and I think the 80 gigawatt 87 is going to be added. Now there is a concern in certain quarters that globally the investment on that is coming down. So are you concerned about that in terms of the investment for the extra capacity you're adding here?
I have the money. My economy has the money. So financing is no issue at all whatsoever. The fact is that the different manufacturers are also coming, and many of them are manufacturers from the West who are going to give us equipment. So that is no issue. You see, the thing is, and when it comes to the reality, when it comes to facts, everybody is realistic. For example, when the gas supplies from the Soviet Union got disrupted because of some bombing, Germany restarted its thermal power plants. UK restarted its thermal power plants, and suddenly all the statements emanating from the developed countries was not about transition, was about energy security. And they said that energy security is of paramount importance. So they bought gas from wherever. Now gas is fossil. Gas is fossil. You burn gas, you emit carbon dioxide. So all all this talk about how necessary it is to transition was gone. All this is reality. So let there be no mistake. Every country looks out for its interests of growth and the interests of its people. You've grown using fossil fuels. You are responsible for 85%. When I say you, I mean the developed world is responsible for 85% of the carbon dioxide load, which has caused this rise in temperature by 1.1 degree. The global rise in temperature is 1.1 degree. 85% of that emission has come from the developed countries. Our contribution is just about, I think, 3 or 4%, whereas my population is 17% of the global population. Our per capita emissions are 1/3 of the global average. The per capita emissions of Europe are 3 times the global average. So they are still spewing at the fastest rate. I am spewing at the least rate. And they are responsible, 85% of them, for 85% of the global warming already. And they are not going to reduce their per capita consumptions. Let me tell you this. That's why they are on the lookout for carbon credits, so that they can offset it. That is the main thing. So they talk and talk, but they haven't done anything. If they were actually serious about doing something, they would have worried about round-the-clock renewable energy. They would have added capacity for making storage batteries. They didn't do that. They didn't do that. Why? Because they thought that, just speeches and talk once a year when the countries gather for COP will be sufficient. Yeah?
Thank you very much, Mr. Singh, for such a thoughtful presentation first and for taking all the questions and for being so thoughtful. Thank you.
I'd request Nalin to please give a token of our appreciation to the minister, so please stay back on this stage. Thank you so much, sir, for that very insightful discussion. I hope the stimulating conversations, the wide array of topics covered and the various aspects deliberated upon at the summit today have given you a lot of food for thought. With that, I would like to thank all the esteemed speakers, panelists, and all of you, the wonderful audience, for being part of Moneycontrol's Policy Next, India's $10 trillion run. Associate partner Reliance Industries, event partners 99 Acres and Trendline. Please enjoy the evening and enjoy your dinner. Thank you.